Okay, we'll call the special committee of the whole meeting to order at 1 p.m. Ask for a motion from Councillor McMillan that the committee of the whole adopt the agenda for the special committee of the whole meeting November 30th, 2020.
I'll give you that motion.
All in favor? Carried. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Good afternoon, members of council and staff. Welcome to kind of the last kind of budget meeting that we have on the slate today, and we'll see if there's any more next steps or any more budget meetings moving forward. I'm just going to share my screen. Everybody can see that now. So this is budget meeting number 4, and this is kind of forming all the recommendations over the last 4 weeks that we've been putting together or not recommendations, all the items we've been discussing over the last 4 weeks and culminating that into making some decisions and making some recommendations to move forward with. So today's meeting, we'll just quickly highlight again the key budget assumptions and make sure that everybody's still comfortable with that. We'll be talking about the key findings from some of the budget survey. There's only kind of 2 slides from that perspective that I've kind of gleaned out of it, but it was a great response. And then the key decisions surrounding community groups, new initiatives, capital plan, the assessment shift impacts, wage increases, tax rates, the utility diversion are the key ones. And then the next steps, what happens from this meeting moving forward. And then we'll go from there. So any questions about the agenda for today's meeting? Seeing no hands. So just to remind everybody, we've approached the budget on a revenue neutral approach using the 2020 revenue as a base. We've adopted a new fee bylaw that has no increase in utility rates proposed. And then any increase to taxes will reflect a decision by council as it relates to a level of service or a new service being introduced, any increased funding to community groups potentially, any increase to contribution to reserves, or any new capital project that's not envisioned within our capital plan that needs to come from some funding either from reserves or from general taxation. I highlighted this in our last presentation. The changes in assessment will impact the budget, and values have continued to decrease from 2020 to 2021. And we'll talk about that later in the presentation. Key findings from the budget survey. I'm pretty happy with the results. We received 286 surveys submitted online by the deadline of November 25th. So that was pretty good response for a first-time survey to the community. And so we're pretty happy to see that kind of response come in. So we've reviewed some of the trends, but we won't get into specifics today unless council wants to bring up some of the specifics. And we're in the process of preparing a staff report for sometime in January to just present that to council as part of a more detailed report for the public as summarizing the comments in January 2021. But certainly this is something we can build off in 2021 and we can improve on. I shared this in an email last week. I think the most important part from the survey is the comments that we've been able to pull out of it. And I think there was 12 pages or 13 pages of comments that were received. I know it's sometimes onerous to read through them all, but there are some really good comments and really good issues identified that we can pull out and start talking about some of those issues. So for the most part, the responses were mostly positive. Of course, there's always going to be negative, and it was always constructive, but we can always do better from that perspective. So from an overall perspective, just on the statistics side of things, with the services we provided and the direction we are headed in, 70% of the respondents rate our customer service as good or excellent, which I thought was a really high number. And I think it's really hard to get higher than that, even though we will try. 60% of the respondents are satisfied with the value they receive for their taxes, which I think is a great result as well. And I think those 2 numbers speak highly of what this council's latest direction from the past and moving forward from that perspective and what their priorities were. So I think that kind of reads into all all the work that was done prior to 2019 and since the flood, that this is, people are starting to see results happen from that perspective and are really satisfied with that direction. This one caught me by surprise a bit. Bylaw enforcement, the number one enforcement topic was traffic violations, which really was kind of surprising from that perspective. And that may be a couple of indications. One, maybe a little bit more education on some of the other issues and not taking it for granted, and maybe they're seeing that the RCMP should be enforcing more traffic violations than bylaw enforcement itself. And maybe there's a little bit of confusion from that perspective. So we'll have to get that clarified. Residents overall are very confident in our ability to respond and protect them. That was a dominant theme throughout the survey, and they're really satisfied with our fire protection perspective. Resident support, $50 a year to asset management. And the next point was kind of surprising too, was not surprising, but not surprising. No support for public transit or to pay for curbside recycling. I left a word out there, sorry about that. So the curbside recycling, I know we've had some community surveys based before where curbside recycling has been a high priority coming from the residents, but I think the question was never asked, are you prepared to pay for it? And I think this kind of clarifies that they're not prepared to pay for that. And if council wants to go down the path of curbside recycling sometime in the future, then it'll have to be some other kind of model than a utility rate structure. Snow removal in residential area appears to be in need of improvement. And that was really a dominant theme, even in the comment section as well, that we need to do some more work or either more education on snow removal in residential areas. And then the biggest topic was probably, biggest response was in regards to a new pool. And this one's going to make it really difficult from, or not difficult, it'll provide us clarity on how to frame the concept of a new pool or a new expansion to the recreation facility. It'll help us from that, especially from the comments that we received as well. But 38% of residents support no financial contribution to any new pool, while 44% of the residents support up to $200 per year for a new pool, which is $200 per year for a new pool with operating and capital expenditures in there is not a significant amount. And so that may limit what we propose and what we bring forward, but that's something to digest and something to use for argument's sakes in the future when we decide to bring forward the business case from that perspective. Majority oh yes,
Chris, may I ask a question? Like, sure. Are you wanting us to ask questions after, like to go
anytime,
back, or
anytime? So
I guess it's a kind of a question about the pool respondents here, because I think this is perhaps a little bit misleading. I think it should say 38% of survey respondents, yes, because it wasn't residents, right? So that's a little bit misleading.
Yeah.
As well as when I was looking at the stats, 38% of the respondents said no increase at all for the pool. And 41% of respondents said up to $100. Yeah. So just for a little bit of clarity, because I found this slide a little bit misleading, because I thought really in total, you've got more like 79% of people saying up to 100. Like, yeah, you see where I'm coming from with this, correct? Because and especially to just say that 38% of survey respondents, because I agree, 286 people, that was a good response, but it's not our entire population.
No, and that, Councillor McMillan, you're absolutely correct. That's the wrong word. I just picked up on that. I should have said respondents in there, and I've been trying to stay consistent from that perspective. Okay. But it does give us a really good sampling that there's a strong flavor of no further money going towards the pool, and that, I think that would be a trend that we would probably see through any referendum as well, continue on, and we'll see what we decide to do with that when we present the business case in hopefully about 7 or 10 days to the strategic session of council, and so that you can see what our steps are and where we may have to take this from that perspective. Perfect. I still believe, the best way to get a firm answer on this is to take this to kind of that conversation of a referendum, but hammering out exactly what is needed and doing some more of that work on different options instead of the, some of the options that are being prepared to date, which was kind of the full meal deal kind of thing and very expensive. Are there hybrids out there that we can make it more affordable, more palatable from that perspective to bring forward? And what else is included within this kind of concept to expand our recreation options within the community?
Right.
Yeah. So
Thanks, Chris.
valid point, Councilor McMillan, and I'll make a note of that to make sure it doesn't say residents, it needs to say respondents from that perspective. So same thing here, majority of respondents support tax increases to maintain or increase levels of service. And same with the walkability and cycling, the majority of respondents support walkability and cycling. The comments were a little bit different on cycling on a few of the comments that I was able to pick out. And so I think there's a little bit more work that we need to probably deal with that perspective, but I think it's all good information to say that we're in the right direction, increasing walkability and active, healthy lifestyles within the community outdoors. From a communications perspective, taxpayers love to use our website. So it's good that we're improving our website from that perspective to make it more accessible. Online surveys, which was good. And then the social media is our methods of consultation. So I think what we've learned through this is out with the old, in with the new kind of themes when it comes to consultation with the community and making investments in online presence in the website, surveys, and other methods of consultation is something that we have to pay attention to in the future. Any more questions on those key findings? And I'm sure there's other ones. Everybody's got their own perspective, what they'll be able to pick out of there. And this is just, I want to be clear, this is my perspective of what I was able to learn from respondents. And I thought there were some interesting things from that perspective. So we'll move on to some of the key decisions. So we're here to kind of talk about and finalize the budget process and what the final budget will look like for December 14th. One of the key decisions that council has to debate today and have a conversation about and make a recommendation for council to consider December 14th is the community group funding. To date, we've budgeted $801,500 in the operating budget dedicated community groups, but our requests have the potential to increase by $58,000 for 2021, depending how council wishes to allocate the funding and which groups get funding or not. And what we'll do is we'll walk you through each request and ask the following kind of key questions. One, approve the current level of funding or increased level of funding, and whether or not a fee for service agreement is applicable or not, to take a look at some degree of stability for the next 3 to 5 years for those groups to enter into a fee for service that delivers that specific service. And we talked about the framework for fee for service when we did the community group funding presentations. And so this would be that conversation that we can start having a conversation whether or not to entertain those with those groups. I also wanted to highlight too that the current cost of living for July 2020 is 1.3%. And that may help you make a decision with any of these increases that have been requested from the community groups. So the table, and I kind of learned this from our budget process last year, how council wanted to see it. I've kind of just done this table kind of with our community groups to go through them one by one and determine whether or not council wants to fund them with an increase and fund them with a fee for service. And Councillor or Mayor Snodgrass, I don't know if you want to lead this conversation or leave that to administration or not.
No, you go ahead and lead it. You're on the roll. It's your spreadsheet, so it's probably easiest to do it that way.
So the High River Library, we have budgeted $377,800, which is $26.88 per capita. They've requested $382,800, which is an increase of $5,000 for 2021. The presentation from the library was very good. Does council wish to see that increase, yes or no? Thoughts?
What was the basis for the increase if we're, and
yeah,
question because we started down this per capita road a number of years ago to make it a lot easier rather than these random requests so that these guys knew what they would want and could get. Where does that $5,000 fit into all of this, Chris?
primarily based upon their presentation and my conversation with the library with Jim and Mary, has been moving to that enhanced level of service. And Kathy, Councillor Cooey, jump in if I'm incorrect, but moving the library to an enhanced level of service. Now, the province has released, kind of a framework of what that looks like and how many staff you should have for enhanced level of service. This would be primarily staff costs to offset increased staffing levels and increased levels of service from that perspective to move into that enhanced level of service, I guess.
Yeah, if I could just jump in, Mayor Snodgrass. I think we've consistently seen a similar ask, probably every budget year since 2014. They do have comparatives that they kind of rate levels of services for libraries, and that's where this comes from. We have, we're excellent in some areas and shy in others, and this is the variance. I will say that, like the town business, COVID has added some costs. It's also depleted some costs. I think probably since the presentation, the deficit does look a little bit lower than what it's going to be for this year. So, potentially we could be looking at a variance in next year's budget as well. But I think at some point we need to address the consistent shortage that and this consistent request that comes forward. They are, I think, running operations there, not extravagantly by any means. We've cut some hours, so the service level has been depleted for our residents, but haven't had much negative feedback. So I think they've all adjusted to that. But I just think it's something at some point we need to address the variance, whether the per capita is on par or not. I believe it's a little bit low compared to other communities of our size. This year, though, I think if we were looking at any sort of increase, it could possibly be a little bit lighter in light of what's happening with COVID and the costs. Hopefully that helps.
So this is that consistent, where every year they're kind of that $5,000 short that we need to catch up on.
Yeah, every year, and we're fortunate enough. We look at the library board looks at ways to cut that number down. We are fortunate that there are some reserves built up in the library because of some generous bequests over the years. So they are able to kind of cover that off, but that was never the intention for those funds to be used for those sorts of needs. Nor should it be.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Kathy.
So,
Bruce?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. So I'm just kind of curious. I thought last year we looked at that 5,000. I thought last year we did that, and I thought that. And correct me if my memory is totally wrong on this. I guess I just haven't seen anything, and I haven't heard anything that would really justify us going 5,000 more than the budgeted amount for this year, or for the coming year. I guess I'm just not convinced. I think the point was made that maybe council should be looking hard at this about the annual shortfall, but maybe the library should also be looking a little harder at this as well. So not to be hard on them. I think they do a good job. I really do, but it just seems every year they come with a higher figure than what we expected and certainly what we had budgeted. Thanks.
Craig, Ms. Mayor Snodgrass, can I respond to that? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Councillor Moore. Just want to respond. The 5,000, I think there was some confusion in last year's budget. We did actually, it was my understanding when I left the discussion that council had agreed to cover the variance, which I think last year was 4,000 and some. There was some confusion, I think, between staff, and because of COLA increases, and that staff was under the understanding that we supported that increase. And so they never did get the additional increase that at least some of our members of council thought we had agreed to. And I just want to reiterate, I don't think that there's anything in the library's budget that they haven't looked at and haven't cut back as possible, as much as they could. So, but I appreciate this is an interesting year.
Yeah, so going my spreadsheet, tallying things from 2014. If we go back even to 2017, and if anybody, Chris, if you have different numbers in front of, or Leanna, then please let me know, but these will be darn close anyways. But 2017, 325,000. 2018 went to 346,200. So about 20K. And then 2019, I've got 362, so another 20K. 2020 was 372,700. And now we're at the 382,800. Oh. Been some significant increases. 2014 was 325,000. It's just sort of bounce back and forth there. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I was just thinking that we randomly decided on the per capita number at the very beginning. And we were hoping that it would be approximately right, but it was just a random number at that time. And I'm just wondering if we should, if it's a consistent type shortfall in the budget, then maybe we should adjust the beginning number by a few cents is all that we would have to make up the 5,000. And every year it increases by something like 1.5%. From being in. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah, no, good question. So, Chris, the 2688 in your spreadsheet here, does that include the $5,000 or no? It does not.
No, that does not. That includes the 2688 is the 377,800.
Okay, good, thank you.
And this, just to be clear to the council, this does not include the contribution for the shared services agreement once we get that agreed to with the county, because they're, and correct me if I'm wrong, Leanne, I think it was like $15,000 additional that the county was going to contribute towards the library on an annual basis on a based upon their per capita.
It was about 12,500, I believe.
Yeah.
But depending on the year, it could be as high depending on the amount of High River residents that have memberships compared to county residents that have memberships.
Okay. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you, Councillor Moore, because that was along the lines that I was thinking. This 2688, like, where does Marigold come into it? Like, do they set the per capita, or is this strictly us?
This is us.
This is us.
So I'm not sure about this, how I feel, because on one hand, I can think, okay, it's $5,000, but if we gave, like, Mayor Snodgrass, what was the library request in 2019 and 20? Like, what did you say again, please?
I have in 2019, 360,200, and 2020, 372,700.
Okay, so we are, like, what administration is currently presenting is 5,000 ahead of, like, more than they got last year. So I guess my question is, when will this, like, will it ever neutralize, that they'll be like the museum, where the museum, you know, when I'm looking at them, it's always kind of a flat line, like just by, I guess I'm just a little bit confused about when would this possibly neutralize, or is it going to be 5,000? Like, what was the shortfall? I guess that's where I'm confused. Like, why are we trying to increase when we already have increased $5,000?
Yeah.
Sorry that my question seems confusing, but I am confused. So
no, Councillor McMillan, I think, and this is something that Councillor Cooley and I have talked about when we had a joint meeting with the chairperson and Mary, and I gave Councillor Cooley a summary. But I think it goes to, I think we need to make a better link to the library and have a more joint conversation with the entire library board and the entire council to understand and spell out expectations. I think, and that may be something where a fee for service can clearly detail what the expectations are from the deliverables, matching up to what the province dictates as what is, baseline levels of service, medium levels of service, and enhanced levels of service is not necessarily a great measure, right? At the end of the day, I think you can still have enhanced and extraordinary levels of service at the base level. It all depends on how you frame it. And so I think it's having that conversation to spell out expectations and get on the same page with the library board and the library staff, so they understand that, this is not a bottomless well of money coming from the municipality that will always have $5,000 or $10,000 waiting for you in the wings. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that it's providing the level of service that our residents and we expect, and that it's meeting those expectations with a good level of service, with that, whatever that level of service is that we're defining. And so I think this is one item that probably, unlike the others in this list, that we need to have a really good internal conversation on what our expectations are, and then have that conversation with the library board through Councillor Cooey, to have that express what those levels of service are. And certainly, working with libraries in the past, there's always this desire. First off, they're typically always underfunded, no matter what jurisdiction you're in. They're always striving for more funding. But at the same time, I don't think libraries are really given clear expectations of what they should be provided as services, and what that really looks like to our clients. And I think that's something that's a conversation that needs to undertake, and libraries probably done some work on what their clients' expectations are for their service too, so that they could feed that back into the system, and so we can understand what our residents and what our users want to see coming from that library. Now, what's not figured into this number is, the fact that it's in a municipal building, that we cover some of the costs, that we have a good lease arrangement with them, that we cover some of the maintenance on the exterior, as well as they pay for some of the utilities. And there's certain ways we can offset this cost by absorbing some different things that they're responsible for through the lease. But I think it's a conversation that, whatever happens with this number, and $5,000 difference in a COVID world is not a huge number to try and offset and trying to develop. But at the end of the day, are they going to be able to stay open? We don't know that yet. And that could be a big impact on their bottom line too. So I think there's lots of conversations on libraries. Libraries are, my personal approach to libraries are the kind of the community living room, right? It's where you share ideas, where you share thoughts, where you learn about everybody. They can be a great tourism resource as well. And I think that's always underestimated when it comes to libraries, but it's also getting the libraries to think that way too, about sharing ideas and sharing tourism resources from that perspective. So I think there's a whole bunch of ways we can deal with that. Is $5,000 increase going to break the town of High River this year? No, it's probably not. But at the same time, do we have the right accountability framework with the library, which I think we're getting better at that. And do we really understand what their expectations of us are, and do they understand our expectations of them, and what they're to what they're to provide. And I think that's where getting into that fee for service kind of conversation, besides just saying provide library services, what does that mean, right? You know, is it just books on the shelf? Is it programs? Is it something else? And I've always had this debate with members of council in other jurisdictions that, you know, some think that it's all, you know, libraries are passé, they're a thing of the past, close them all down, we're going to go to electronic means. And that's not what people want. People want that place to go. It's that social interaction perspective. And we're seeing that really heavy through COVID about the mental health issues with lack of social interaction. So it's $5,000 isn't going to break us, but at the same time, there's some significant increases since 2014 to now that, you know, we need to kind of dive into that a little bit deeper and understand why and what's going on from that perspective. And Mary and I have had some really good conversations, and I think she understands where that this isn't a bank that can continue rolling out dollars to them, and that there's got to be some limit and some stoppage at that from that point of perspective. And I think that's something that council has to debate. What is that number? Is it 2688 per capita, or is it just a lump sum? And we say it's 382,800, and that's where we're stopping for the future, and maybe just apply a cost of living increase at 1.3% or 1.5%, like Councillor Moore had mentioned, on an annual basis moving forward, so that they have some stable level of funding. And we haven't figured in the shared services agreement with the county yet into this, and that's something to be aware of that could have a significant financial impact for the library for sure. So I know that's a ramble, but that's kind of just trying to answer that question.
So Chris, I really like your idea about council meeting with the library. So from my perspective, at this point, I'm not in favor of the $5,000 increase at this point, because I don't think we have enough information. And I think just with some clarity, and in the future when we meet, and if it then we understand, then I could see that we would work with them. As people know, I'm a huge advocate of the library and still doing programming via Zoom there. And however, I just want some more clarity before, because it's a hard one. You can kind of look at it and think, okay, it's $5,000. But as you pointed out, as well as Mayor Snodgrass, when you see the significant increase since 2019 or 16, whatever was mentioned, yes, they needed it, but it's a case of me personally, I need a little bit more clarity before agreeing to the 5,000 increase.
Leanna,
Yes,
the amount the library was given last year, 372,700, is that right?
that is correct.
Okay, so between last year and this year, it's not a $5,000 increase. It's a $10,000 increase.
That is correct.
Like the $5,000 is already in that 377,800.
It would,
No, it's in the 382,800.
well, no, because if 2020 funding was $372,700, 372, right?
That's what I have here.
Going to the 377, which is the proposed, there's $5,000 in that 377 if you compare it directly with last year.
Well, it's actually only the percentage amount that we applied to all of the community groups.
Yeah, I know, which is $5,000,
Right.
right? Which is $5,000.
So my starting number there that I have listed at 377.8 is incorrect. It should be 372.7. So just going from 372.7 to 382.8 is basically 10,000.
So I'm looking at Councillor Cooey's eyebrows. So we're always this. Yes, we give the per capita. There's an increase per capita on that rate every year, right? And right now we've done how big of an increase on the per capita?
It's 0 this year that we built our base budget on.
It's 0.
Yes, because that's what we built into our budget, was a 0% cost of living increase.
Okay. So the end of the day, last year, the library was given $372,700.
Correct.
They are now asking for $382,800, which compared to their money last year to this year is an increase of $10,100.
Correct.
It's not $5,000. So the $5,000 is the 377,800.
Correct.
Does that make sense, Kathy?
Yeah, just so I'm clear, so it's the proposed budget right now is giving them $5,000.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's, yes, I understand that now, yes.
Councillor Masterman. Sorry, I got like 9 windows open here. So if I don't see your hand right away, then yell at me, please.
I appreciate that, Mayor Snyder. So, yeah, I mean, I had the same question. I just assumed that the 5,000 was reflected the percentage increase based on our formula, but that's obviously wrong. And I just want to go back to something Chris said, which I think would apply to several facilities that the town owns, and certainly helps in maintenance and other costs. At some point, I would really like to see in the budget process those figures as well, so that we have a true figure of what it costs us to operate these facilities, as opposed to just their budgeted amount. Like if we're paying, and just to pull a figure out, 5,000 a year in building maintenance costs, you know, I'd like to see that figure somewhere. And I think the same would apply for the, you know, Memorial Center and the museum and Shepherd Park. And it would just be helpful to me. But going back to their request, you know, it amazes me that you know, the actual budgeted or the proposed budget amount is actually 372.
Oh, sorry, 377,800. Sorry, that was my error. I said that was, I normally have the 2020 there. And so you see the comparison between 2020 and 2021. So what we've done is we've hidden that one column. And so we only see the 2021 proposed budget versus what they've requested in this presentation.
Okay, so they asked for 382. So sorry, I'm just confused why we gave them $5,000 more on paper. Like the proposed budget is if that's 377, that's 5,000 more than last year, but they've actually asked for 382. I'm just wondering why we just I know we haven't decided anything, but I guess I'm just confused as well. So
my direction, I thought from council, was that we were to make up the 5,000 that we were short from the previous year. And then I was to apply a 0% COLA and a 0% population increase to all of the community groups. So I increased the library by the 5,000 from the previous year, from 2020's funding to 2021's funding.
And from what I remember, Leanna, you're exactly correct. That following our meetings last year, and Councillor Cooey and I met with Jim and Marianne, and that is exactly kind of what we brought back to council is, you know, there's this consistent $5,000. So that's where you're absolutely right. You put it in the right spot. So that's why we're at this 377,800, which makes complete sense to me. And to me, for me, is fair. The 382,800, I don't know where they came up with that number, but you know, it's an ask and it's up to us to say yes or no. So the $5,000 increase is in the 377,800.
Correct.
The way I'm looking at it from last year. Not the way I'm looking at it, it's just the way it is. So if I'm reading council right, we're not interested in the 382,800. I think the question is more back to the 377,800. Are you okay with that? Councillor Kinghorn, you had your hand up for a second there and then it was down. So if you got a question, just put your hand back up. But go ahead, Jamie.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get back to High River so I can join the meeting from my computer, but so maybe a bit noisy. So I just wanted to clarify with Leanne is that last year it was 372 with a population of X, whatever that number was. This year
it was 14,052 based on our municipal census.
Okay, so this year we're saying the population is still 14,072. So technically, if we followed the per capita line, there would be no increase. Is that correct?
Correct, except we adjusted the starting point to include the 5,000. So I did a little bit of magic to make it work.
That was missed from last year. Okay, so what we're doing is essentially changing the per capita amount when we add this 5,000 in, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I guess, so from my perspective, I could see us going to the 377 based on the historic numbers that Mayor Snodgrass gave us. But I think instead of saying we're giving 5,000, we should adjust the per capita rate and just say, you know, this is what it is going forward. The per capita rate is what it is. If you want to negotiate that, we can talk about it. But going through these long discussions at budget time, it seems to me to defeat the whole reason behind the per capita rate. Thank you.
No, that's exactly it. This is the one that we continue to hash out every year for a very long time every year compared to all the others. So the 377,800, Leanna.
Yes.
The 2688 is the per capita number, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to throw it to a council vote as to whether, and I'll ask just directly on the 377,800, whether you support it or not, and I'll go through each one. Councillor Masterman.
Yes.
Councillor Moore. We'll come back to Dawn. Councillor McMillan.
Yes.
Councillor Cooey.
Yes.
Councillor Nychuk.
Yes.
Councillor Kinghorn.
Yes.
Good. Councillor Moore, are you back on? You're
Yeah.
in? Okay, yes. So it's unanimous yes. Chris, for the 377,800.
Perfect.
I got a $1 bill. Would you give me two? Would you
So,
give me
Chris,
two?
did you want to know anything about the fee for service for the library?
Yes, I want to bring this up to council. Do you think it would work to have a fee for service with the library that has a stable level of funding for a 3 or a 5 year term, whatever council deems? Or do you want to keep debating this each and every year as part of the budget process?
Can you explain the fee for service concept to me, please?
So the fee for service concept is a framework or an agreement with an outside user group like this that spells out what our expectations and what their deliverables would actually be. So for the library, for example, we'll talk about so many hours that they have to be open, so many programs per year, what they can charge for programs potentially, any special events they may choose to host, what they would be hosting from that perspective. And then it would lay out those deliverables, and then it would have a defined level of funding for 3 years. So it would probably increase over those 3 year terms or a 5 year term, whatever council chose, based upon a cost of living index or based upon an agreed upon level of increase, be it a $5,000. We'd be talking about $5,000 today. I'm just going to use that as an example. $5,000 increase per year over that 3 year term, that they would not come back to negotiate any other terms or an increased ask from that perspective. So that would be the framework, and then we wouldn't have to debate this once every 3 or 5 years, whichever the term council so chose.
But going back to what Councillor Kinghorn was saying, is, and when we started this per capita thing, that was exactly the purpose of the per capita thing, was just to, here's your number and you get your annual increase and we're done. I think it's when it continues to come back to us with the mentality that they're not subject to that, and they still, why not make it $420,000? It just doesn't matter, right? Like, I guess that's where we've got to be very, very clear that the 2688, that's your per capita amount going forward.
And that would be the fee for service. It would
Right.
address that and say 2688 plus the Calgary cost of living to July of each year kind of thing, to adjust for cost of living if council wanted to adjust it for cost of living or not.
Okay.
And then it would specifically identify what the deliverables or what the expectations are for council on what the deliverables would be. And that would be negotiated. And we would sit down and hammer that out with the library and the library board. And then they would be given a stable level of funding that they knew consistently that over the next 3 or 5 years that they would be getting this funding consistently, what they have to deliver to the town and what our expectations are, and what our relationship, and you can work the lease into this if you want to, what our relationship is from a business perspective. And they would not come back to council, and council would be in their absolute rights to say, no, you're not getting extra money unless they came in for a very special or unique event or something happened that they needed some additional money for something that was very one-off, would constitute a discretionary grant and aid kind of process. I look at this list of community group funding, my gut would be the majority would be fee-for-service arrangements, so that we're not debating this each and every year. And that if they have a special event or something along those lines that they want to bring back forward, then we go through a discretionary grant and aid kind of process where they're allowed to apply through the Community Vitality Fund for some of that funding from that perspective or something. So that's what a fee-for-service arrangement would do. It would clearly spell out what our business relationship is, and make it very clear to the library and for the town what we will provide and what we expect to see as a deliverable.
Okay. I think that the only red flag that I've got in is to make sure that when we do these kinds of agreements that we don't get into micromanaging what Marianne and the board want to do. That's not our place, right? If it outlines exactly what lease and everything else and how you use the facility, that's one thing, but getting into what they actually do, we want to stay out of that. Yeah, it would, in this case, it would probably define a minimum number of hours that they need to be open, right? So what is that? Is that 30 hours a week? Is that 35 hours a week? Is it 40 hours a week?
you know, and
Even that, Chris, I don't know. That's not, you open the doors or you close the doors. That's not,
well, yeah, but I guess at the end of the day, if they're getting it, if we want to spell out an expectation, how they operate, you know, do we want to have a minimum hours of operation from that perspective? Much like our rec center, right? What's the expectation of the public from that perspective? That's not so much micromanaging, because that's talking about a deliverable for the funding that you're getting. If we decide to back out of the funding, then that's a different question, right?
okay. Well, I can support looking into a fee for service. I'd really like to see how we kind of start to lay these kinds of things out, Chris. It's new, and I'd like to see that before I agree to it. Of course, it'll have to come back to us before we do it. Councillor McMillan, I got two for questions.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. And thank you also for bringing up your comments about micromanagement, because I'm very interested in exploring the fee for service component as well. But I just like even when, and I know you're just outlining some things, Chris, but I don't think it's at all our parameters to dictate how many programs the library has. And we'd also have to make sure it's very much in alignment, because they're under their own library board act as well. So it couldn't contravene any of those expectations. And but I think to have a contract that's outlined some guaranteed funding, because I think it makes it sense for people to be able to budget. So I like that part about it for sure, but I wouldn't at all support that we would be micromanaging these places, because they do a very good job. They're the experts in their own fields. They know what they're doing.
Just got to be careful on the boundaries. Councillor Moore.
Yes, also before we do even set a number on a fee for service or anything, we have to find out what the amount that the county will be contributing as well. So there'd be an extra few dollars in there, and that would affect the number that we come up with.
That's correct, Councillor Moore, yeah.
Councillor Cooey.
Chris, just a quick question as if we go forward looking at fee for service, the library board just is recently reviewing the lease agreement from the town.
Mhm.
And when we go forward with fee for service agreements, they can look nothing like a lease agreement that
No.
the average Joe struggles to understand. So it's not full of legalese. So
No.
just a comment.
For council's information, I can't remember if I sent you out a copy of one in a previous email, but it's a simple 2-page agreement that here's what your minimum levels of service are going to be that we'll pay for. This is how you're going to report it. Each year, you're going to have to submit an annual financial report and how you delivered those levels of service. And this is how much money we'll provide you in exchange for that. Very, very simple 2-pager, and makes them accountable to report back on how they've used those funds from that perspective too, so that there's a framework for the public for the taxpayers as well, that they see that it's being used appropriately. Not that there is any question about that, but it provides that additional level of transparency. But it can be, the ones that I've drafted have been 2 to 3 pages maximum, very, very simple language, and spelled out the term and how much they're going to get over year from year. So I'll send you out some examples so that you guys can take a look at what we're talking about from that perspective. I can't remember if I sent you ones or not for the life of me.
No, we'll work on that. Dynamite. That's it for questions. So library is a yes at the 377.8.
Okay. Museum of the Highwood. Status quo.
Status quo number. Quick vote from council. If you're not in favor of the 149.3, please raise your hand.
I can't see hands.
I can see hands and there are none.
Okay.
That made any sense at all.
No.
So we're good there with the 149.3.
Highwood Memorial Center.
This is a big one.
Oops. They're asking for a 48,775 increase. Leanna, do you have the background on what constitutes that increase?
I believe most of it is due to reduction of events that are being booked, and their general operating is staying. I'm just pulling up their package here right now so I can see it. It's just, it looks like they have a reduction in revenue from the previous year.
That is a COVID, so that'd be a COVID impact then, correct?
Yes.
Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. My understanding of this 48 ask or increased ask is because of COVID, and they have not been able to lease out their facility over the last whatever period of months it's been. So would this not be a one-time grant as opposed to an ongoing increase in funding? Could we approach it from that perspective? Or maybe nobody else agrees with me, but I see this as a one-time grant during COVID, and once COVID is over, they should be back to renting their facility out and back into a decent revenue stream. Thank you.
That's correct. You could fund it that way as well, Councillor Kinghorn, as a one-term grant. It could also potentially qualify under our funding from the federal government and the province for COVID recovery. From that perspective as a loss of revenue. We're going through that agreement right now and trying to identify our costs as well as what some of our outside groups may be impacted from a COVID perspective. Bring that recommendation back to council. And that's at $1.4 million.
Yeah, that was one of my questions, is because this is 100% COVID related, is there grants or COVID funding from government that'll cover this kind of stuff?
We think under most that it would fit.
Okay. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. That's exactly what I was going to suggest. Is that with the Moose grant, because it is all of the revenue is contingent upon rented space, and all of the events, weddings, everything that they had lined up for 2020 were actually either canceled by the group or because we were, the Memorial Center was closed down. Even the regular renters, the Rotary Club is doing all of their meetings by Zoom, and the Windmill Theater players are not providing any rental revenue as well. The film groups that normally come in, just lately we had a filming group in, but it's been a tremendous loss of revenue. And at the same time, all of the expenses, like the $16,000 a year insurance on the building, and the approximately $3,000 a month utilities, continue to go on. So there hasn't, other than staff, if we laid off all but the basic staff that only come in on call. So it's, and the events that we had booked to the end of the year now have been kiboshed for the next 3 weeks. So there's no events going on. And of course, kitchen rentals, which was a good source of revenue, has been non-existent. So all of the sources of revenue have dried up, but a lot of the expenses, including the annual maintenance, contractor fees, etc., are still ongoing. So it is entirely COVID. And I was hoping that we might be able to apply that grant because it is a town-owned facility, that we might be able to apply that grant to that increased figure this year.
Yes, the most grant, that's where we're taking a look at all the costs associated with outside groups, including the library, museum, and Highwood Center, and seeing how they'll qualify. And I think most of these will qualify for the most grant that we received in the $1.4 million. And that will, this 48,775 would be fit underneath that most grant from our initial look at it. But we haven't done the work yet on what all the other expenses that would qualify for that yet at this point. So,
but if it didn't qualify for some reason, that cost still has to be covered.
mm-hmm.
So it's a tough one right now.
Councillor Masterman.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. Sort of along those lines, Chris, what would be wrong with us just approving the 114.9 figure on the understanding that some or all of the COVID shortfall will be covered by a grant? And if it's not, if there's still a shortfall, then we could revisit that. Or is that not a good approach?
No, that's a fine approach, Councillor Masterman. We can do it from as a two-staged approach. From that perspective, we can approve the 114.9, and then once we've determined all the costs associated with most, the 48,775 as a second stage from that perspective to cover off their loss of revenue. Now, the other key thing that we don't know is how much revenue could they potentially lose in 2021 as well. That may fit within the most grant, that we don't know that answer yet, and may not know that answer. So that'd be the one caveat from that perspective. But approaching this on a two-step process there's nothing wrong with that. Saying yes to the 114.9, and then holding back the 48,775 until we've gone through the most requirements and allocated the funding from that perspective.
Yeah, I like that idea. Till we know. All the council in favor of 114.9 and investigating the 48,775 coming from grants. Raise your hand if you're against that. No hands, so 114.9 for now.
Handy bus, 22.4.
Let's do a few of these in order. If we do the handy bus, CVAC, STARS, and the airport. So handy bus, no change from last year, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
CVAC, 40K, no, same as last year. STARS, same as last year, 14.8.
I want to talk a little bit about CVAC. Originally, council wanted $70,000 to be paid out to CVAC, where 30,000 was going to be paid from reserves. So the 40,000 was strictly tax dollars.
Right.
So in this budget, we only have the tax dollars that are being allocated for CVAC. If council wishes to increase it back to 70, we can pull $30,000 from reserves again because we have not spent that money. Or we can increase taxes right to the 70,000.
Okay. So last year, yeah, we said, okay, $70,000, 40 coming from this decision, and then 30 was coming from remaining funds with CVAC, correct?
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Does CVAC have remaining funds this year?
They have not spent the 40,000 to date.
They have not spent last year's money?
No.
Okay. So if we gave them another 40 this year, there'd be $80,000 sitting in there?
They spent, I think, about 25,000 in 2020.
Okay. So they didn't even go through the reserve money.
No. And that's why I'm saying if we want to go to the 70, we still have the 30,000 sitting in reserves.
Gotcha. What's 2021 going to look like for this, Bruce? I'm going to ask you because you're close to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a crapshoot what 2021 is going to look like. You know, I think, you know, CVAC hasn't met since February 19th, and I meant to look up to see how much we did spend. You know, Leanna, you thought it was maybe 25,000, but did we not give them 70,000?
We gave them 70,000.
Yeah, so
40,000.
They would have like 45,000 left, right? And then if we give them 40,000 now, they'll have 85,000 plus the reserve. Is that correct?
Well, because they haven't spent the 30,000, we'd leave it sitting in reserves. So they say they've spent 25 to date out of the tax dollars. So they would basically, if we chose to, we could transfer the balance into the CVAC reserve for 2020. So then that would leave the CVAC reserve with the 30,000 plus maybe it's the 15,000 for 2020. So that would leave the CVAC reserve sitting at 45. And then if you want to then leave the tax dollars at the 40,000, we could then fund another 45,000 from reserves.
Okay, so I mean, we had talked about possibly using some CVAC money for some other initiatives, and so you know it's kind of difficult to say what 2021 is going to look like from CVAC's point of view. You know, they'll be having their first meeting. You know, say if they meet in January, that'll be their first meeting in almost a year. I would really like, before they have their first, before they resume meeting, I'd really like if the town could have some kind of messaging communications plan that is telling people in High River what CVAC is all about, inviting their submissions, because you know my fear is that it you know it's going to be kind of off people's radar for almost a year, and it's going to need some kind of kickstart to get it going again, and to get some really good ideas submitted, and we had talked possibly about some of the things, other expenses that we are facing that maybe they you know could be done by CVAC. And so I don't know, I guess I'm just I guess I'm just you know, if they've spent 25,000 of $70,000, does that not mean they've got 45,000 like in their account, not in reserves, but in their account? Like I mean, their account is our account, but sorry, I'm just trying to get this clear in my head, Leanna.
Well, because we never spent the full 70,000, we're leaving the $30,000 sitting in a reserve account. So technically what we've been doing saying is they've got $40,000 to be paid from taxes, and they've only spent 25. So that'd be 15,000 that we could transfer back into a reserve for them, if that's what you wish to do. So then we would then have $45,000 sitting in reserves.
So here's a question, because like last year we gave them 70 grand. We said, okay, you get 70 grand. 40 came from tax dollars, 30 came from money they had left over from previous years. They used 25 of it, so there's wherever, whichever account it's sitting in, there's $45,000 sitting there right now.
Correct.
And not a lot happened last summer with CVAC because of the COVID. I do not see anything changing anytime soon. With everybody wanting to get together and do all these community things until we get through this, vaccine shows up and we're all good to go. I don't see anything changing. My thought is to put this number to 0 until we see where we're going, because they've got, if they need it, there's $45,000 sitting there. They've already got $45,000 to use. I'm not prepared to give them another 40 when you only used 25 last year. It doesn't look like anything's going to change this year. Then if, like Bruce says, if everybody comes to the table and things change quicker than I think, then, you know, we can revisit this one. But I just don't see why we would put $40,000 back in when they've already got.
I also think that I was very optimistic by saying that, you know, that they could be back in operation by January. Like, you know, Chris, you know better than I do and how you're encouraging some of these committees to be very cautious in getting back together, certainly face to face, and until, you know, as you say, Mayor Snodgrass, until the community groups feel comfortable getting together to do projects. You know, we're probably some months away from actually getting, you know, unless there's anything that comes from us that we think, you know, maybe CVAC, you know, could cover. And so, yeah, it's I'd have a tough time, Mayor Snodgrass, arguing against you. Your suggestion of taking them to 0 since they've already got 45 sitting there.
And then if things come to be, we can revisit this thing and
yeah,
we can come back to it. But right now, I'm just not seeing where the actual need is. If you only did 25 last year, I don't see why we need to have basically $85,000 sitting there available to you, right? So I don't get that. So we can always come back to it, but $40,000 just because we did it last year doesn't sit right with me. Councillor Cooey.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. I was going to make the suggestion of, you're right, a lower amount, whether that be 10 or 20,000. I've chatted or heard, not chatted, heard of a couple projects that might come to the table. I guess I like the idea of being able to build that reserve, because our hope is that this fund is going to take off, and at some point, that if we don't have those reserves, some council is going to have to make that decision, taking that big jump from 40 to 70, or doing it gradually. And I just like the idea of having that reserve to be able to top up this fund so future councillors can gradually get that to a number that everybody's comfortable with. So I think this is a good opportunity, right, in the right year to cut that number from 40, but I would like to see us to put something towards it.
But in that reserve right now, there should be $45,000.
Which doesn't cover 2 years of the variance if we were to continue at 70. And I appreciate where you're coming from. We could just pull it from there and
I don't see, what do you mean by the variance, because all of this, what CVAC does is all dictated by community groups coming forward and asking for funds. If they don't do that, there's no expense, right? So
absolutely. I guess I'm saying is we kind of had 70,000 as our number. And so once that reserve is gone, either it all has to come from taxes or that number has to be adjusted.
I get what you're saying. Yes. And I'd like to see it every year come from taxes. I would like to see this community stepping forward every year and using up $70,000 of our money, and plus whatever the movies and stuff put into their account, right? That would be great. But I don't believe in putting money to something that, because of COVID, just people aren't going to use the money. You got a pretty good idea. That was proven last year. So that's where I'm saying, well, let's just hold on to the 40K right now. And, you know, if they need it, if it's coming and everybody's coming, well, absolutely, we're not going to neglect it. They can come back and say, hey, we've blown through your 45 grand. We need another 40. No problem. Back to Bruce.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. So just to complicate things a little further, Deanna, I thought that CVAC had money in a reserve from a few years ago as well. Or am I dreaming that?
This is the same money that we're talking about. So because they haven't spent it, it's still sitting there. So it's like your personal savings account. If you don't spend it, that money is still there for you to use next week.
Okay, so if they had a reserve a couple of years ago, and then we voted last year to give them 70 for this year, was that not over and above the money that was sitting in the reserve?
No, that's why we only did 40K last year, because they had the reserve from a few years ago, right?
That's correct. And we funded
No, you're absolutely
back the skate park light.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Thank you.
Yeah. And so for 2021, it's projected to be 39,287 is the reserve. And if council's targeting $70,000 annually to be used for CVAC, then figuring out how that restricted funding will last over a period of time is something that council will just have to make sure it balances out, or if it comes, the $70,000 comes fully from taxation. So CVAC, is it zeroing out, council, or are we leaving something in?
Let's go with the, Bruce, your hand is still up. I don't know if you had another question, but.
No, actually, I do, Craig, and I'm sorry about this, but on the printout in front of us, or on the chart in front of us, Community Vitality Fund shows 0 under reserve funding. So if there was actually reserve funding, should that not be showing there?
We need the authorization from you to spend the money.
So this
Okay, I guess, sorry, Craig. I guess what I mean is if they have $45,000 left of, you know, this year in the budgeted amount or whatever it is, should that not show there?
Well, no, because this isn't a balance sheet. This is a new, you know, money we're putting forward this year. So that's why we're saying 0 in the reserve funding. We're not going to add anything to the reserve funding. It's the Community Vitality Fund. Do we want to put $40,000 of new money into that group, which would basically hand them $85,000 for 2021, which hasn't been used in 2 years because we came out of 2019 with a reserve. Right. So that's why I'm saying, like, let's hold it to 0 in my mind and see where it goes. If it wasn't COVID, I'd be saying, yeah, let's make sure they got at least $70,000 in there that they can hand out to this community. But community's not prepared, and and I don't think they should be out and about, hanging out, doing all these things. And blah, blah, blah. So I'll ask for the vote to take this one to 0. For the time being, and be reevaluating it throughout 2021 to see where they're at. If you are against that, please raise your hand or speak up, yell, chicken dance, something. Take it to 0, Chris and Leanna. Handy bus and stars, no change from last year. Is everybody okay with that? Raise your hand if you have questions or against. Handy bus and stars remains. And the airport, we're still on the $1,000 funding decline that we've been going since 2014. Down to $4,000, so a couple of years left there. Councillor Kinghorn, you got to speak to that one? Nope. So everybody okay with the 4,000 for the airport? Kathy?
Sorry, I am okay with that. Just back to CVAC for just quickly, the reserve fund, should we not have some money available that says they can access it? Because based on this, they have 0 funds.
Councillor Cooey, they'll always have funding in the reserve as restricted revenue within our general operating. Okay. So they'll always have that 39,287 plus whatever's left over from this year. If we decide to, if council transfers it back into the reserve fund, they'll always have that as restricted funding that council can allocate at any time of the year by resolution.
Thank you. Sorry, Mayor Snodgrass.
No, that's fine. Right now, CVAC has $45,000 approximately available in their hands to use. Yeah. Sitting in their reserve or sitting in their general, right? So, but they've got money to use right now. If they need it, it's there. If they need more, well, we'll deal with that. Carol?
Thank you. Along those lines then, so thank you, Councillor Cooey, for bringing this up, because with it being in a restricted reserve, currently CVAC can say yes to projects that are under $2,000, correct?
That's correct.
So now though, if the funds are in a restricted reserve, would that eliminate their right to approve things that are under $2,000? Like would they have to, would every single thing have to come to council?
Council would have to have a resolution to withdraw whatever money they need to fund whatever project, even if it's under $2,000.
Okay, and I guess like really during COVID times, it's not a bad thing for council to know what's going on. But once again, when COVID would, you know, if our world ever goes back to stability, that I think CVAC should have the right to be able to approve things that are under $2,000 without it having everything coming to us.
And that would be the intent, Councilor McMillan, that once we got back to whatever the sense of normal is going to be in the future, that they would be allocated their $70,000 per year, and hopefully would spend all of it. Anything under $2,000 would be under their purvey to assign. Anything over $2,000 would require council approval.
Great, thank you very much.
Dare.
Yes.
They're not asking for any money, correct?
No, they've ran into a funding crunch. Most of their other organizations have not come to the table to fund them in the future. So we've kind of left them in the list at $6,300 and ask council whether they want to fund them or not. And whether or not this funding will actually deliver a program at all is unknown.
Yeah, like that's, I guess that was my question. Are they doing this at all because of the others that are backing out? Because I love the program. I love what it does. And but if it's not operating, there's no point in putting money to it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Mayor Snodgrass, that the DARE program is a fantastic program. But if it doesn't have the other funding from the other partners, I think it struggles.
Yeah, $6,300 isn't going to do it. Okay, so we'll just leave that one till we find out more as to what they're doing. If they are operating, then they can come. Shepherd Park, that's fine. Museum of the Highwood, Foothills Tourism Association. Let's open that one. Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. My question is to Leanne. I thought we gave him a couple of $1,000s last year. Is that incorrect?
I don't believe we did.
No, I don't think we gave him anything.
I thought I read that somewhere, and actually I was surprised when I read it. But I again would not support giving $10,000 to Foothills Tourism Support Association.
Councillor Masterman.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. No, I was a little surprised to see that even on our list, because we had a presentation from them, and we had a really good discussion, and I still remain unconvinced that they're going to give us $10,000 worth of anything, other than they'll put our name out there, but I mean, we can do that, and so I'm not in favor of anything.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I believe we did give them some money. It wasn't through community group funding request. It was at that presentation. I thought we did give them $2,000. Weren't they asking for like 5 or 7? But I thought we did give them $2,000. Like, we didn't say 0, at least my recollection. And it was at a council meeting at that presentation. It wasn't during the community group funding request as part of the budget process.
Councillor McMillan, I think you're correct. I think in September there was a resolution of council, September 2019. I think there was a resolution of council that gave them, I can't remember the number, some money. Wasn't through community groups, but it was for 2019 funding. So they got that money in 2019. So it wouldn't show up as a 2020 request.
Okay,
That
but
makes sense.
Perfect, because I do recall that we gave them something.
Yeah, I can't remember the number.
And as far as like for 2021 budget, I agree with fellow council that I don't support this.
Sorry, back to where I'm at. Jamie, your hand's up or still up? Got a question? You're good? Councillor Nychuk, you had your hand up for a second? No?
I'm good, Mayor Snodgrass. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get one clarification? Did we leave Lights and Parade Society at the 30,000?
Lights and Parade is at 30,000.
Okay.
Now, another question. With there being no parades.
Do we close off Foothills before we go on the parades?
Yeah, do tourism.
Close off Foothills.
Yeah,
tourism.
thank you. Are we at 0 for Foothills tourism? Raise your hand if you are against 0. Foothills tourism is at 0. So going back, thanks, Leanna, because I did jump that one. The Lights and Parade Society at $30,000. Kind of gain like CVAC. Is there any point in putting more money into these funds? Because I'm sure they're sitting on money that's left over from the 2 parades this year not happening. We give them $30,000 and that goes back into their bank account as well, which is fine, I guess, but fine if we're going to have parades in 2021. Maybe Santa Claus, but May Little Britches is still kind of doubtful. So I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
They have been expending money. I don't know exactly what their balance is because we haven't seen their final report, and they've been fixing some stuff. They've been adding some light displays as well for Christmas. I think this is one that you watch. I think you allocate the $30,000 towards it and you watch and see what happens. And maybe, as part of the agreement, if we let them know that we'll only provide 50% by July 1st and 50% by December 31st kind of thing, so that we can monitor exactly how COVID's going to impact them. Because you're right, I don't think by May that we'll be seeing Little Britches take place again. I think that's a long shot still. I think Canada even is a long shot still from that perspective. So Christmas might be in the framework. And so do we have a bigger Christmas celebration than normal too? That's something that we'll leave up to the parade organizers. They are doing their mini parades through the community. So there is some kind of Christmas outreach and celebration through their many neighborhood parades, or the porch parades as it's being called. So they are expending some dollars from that perspective. So, but I don't know exactly how much they'll use by the end of the year.
Okay. And lots of times those cost more than normal stuff. Councillor Kinghorn?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Yeah, Chris, that's what I was going to ask. Do we not expect a financial report from the organization before we issue new funding? Is that expected, or is that going to happen? Or?
It usually happens at the end of the year. So we don't give them additional funding until we've seen that financial report typically. And that's part of their reporting requirement. So.
Thank you.
So just going back to the Foothills Tourism, they were funded for startup costs for $3,000 at the end of 19. So the council did approve the $3,000 for startup costs, but we didn't fund them anything in 2020.
Okay. Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. So just thinking about the lights that they've already put up and the porch parades. So just clarifying that, like I agree that we need to have a financial statement, but I guess this is one where I kind of think that their reserve is quite important to them because of they're still incurring costs. So I think I'd be in favor of actually keeping the 30,000, because even as Chris happened to mention that perhaps next Christmas there will be a big celebration or something. So I guess, or Mayor Snodgrass, if you could just clarify why you are suggesting zero, because maybe then I can get it in my head.
No, I'm with the $30,000. I wanted to bring up zero just because I kind of relating it to CVAC, but it is a little bit different because these guys are doing things. There's things happening and they're doing a hell of a job with it when you drive through the park. So they still have expenses. There's still things going on, and I don't believe that they'll misuse the money at all. So no, I'm 100% that
Okay.
I support the 30K for sure. Just asking, bringing it up for conversation is all.
No, and it's good. And I think from my perspective as well, it's very much a morale boost, seeing the lights and the porch parade for people. So, and I just appreciate your clarification, Craig, on that. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. So along those same lines, like I didn't hear anything, or I didn't hear from Ted a full justification for $30,000, and maybe the others did that day of the presentations, but I didn't hear that. I would love to know, and I don't recall that we asked them this, and I meant to, but I'd love to know how much they have left from last year's grant, like this year's grant. And I agree that what they do is great for the town. It's a great morale booster. Definitely, I'm not saying we need to pull the rug out from under them or anything like that. But but I'd really like to know a little bit more about, where, how they're spending this $30,000 this year, and maybe we just give it to them and then hold them to account at the end of the year when we have a much better idea how 2021 kind of rolled out and impacted them. And I have no fears that they're squandering the money, but I do think that we need to be just really, really careful for when people say to us, $30,000 and there weren't 2 parades. What did they spend it on? Like what? And we just have to be prepared to defend that. And right now, I don't have the information that I can defend that. So, yeah. So whatever.
So when they provided their documentation for the community group funding, we had only advanced them $15,000. They'd already spent more than the $15,000. And then they came back and said that they are adding more lights and everything to George Lane Park. So we then advanced them the remaining $15,000 for 2020. So at this point, we do not have a financial statement. We're also not at the end of 2020. So I honestly believe that we wouldn't actually see that until the following year when we do our next ask.
Yeah, and I think, Bruce, that well, I think a lot of the money is probably going to lights. When I look at what's going on in George Lane Park and the increase this year, and my business has supported that, and I know what a lot of those displays cost to build, and it's not cheap. So with the expansion of the lights, and that's what they're using this year's money for, and taking advantage of that they're not spending it on parades, but they can increase the lights. I support that. I think it's good. I think if we're going to question Ted, that needed to happen last week, and but we can always do that as we're going forward as well. So
yeah, no, certainly Mayor Snodgrass, I'll support the 30,000.
Okay.
I'm just saying that I need to be able to, we all need to be able to defend that. So
yep, absolutely. Okay, so we're good. Jamie, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify my comments as well. I do support keeping the 30,000 there, but just like anything else, I'd like to see at the end of the year the financial statement on where things went. And I look at this group as being very important to High River. There are actually 3 events here that we're doing. We're doing the Christmas in the Park. We're doing 2 parades. So from a public perspective, they see the lights in the park, but they didn't see the 2 parades this year. So just to make sure we're clear and transparent, this is where the money went and this is what happened, and that's for the public. I totally trust the two gentlemen, but I think it should be a public record. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so everybody's good with the 30,000 to the lights and parade. If you're against it, raise your hand, please. 30K to lights, Chris.
So I think that's all of them now. Or do we need to talk about Shepherd Family Park? I think we said yes to 12,000, right?
They did say yes to 12,000.
Yeah. So I'm going to summarize for a recommendation to come forward to council then, if everybody can bear with me. And if I miss a number, let me know. Library at 377,800. Museum at 149,300. The Highwood Center at 114,900, with the provision that 48,775 comes from most once we finalize that. Stars at 14,800. Lights and Parade at 30,000. Airport at 4,000. CVAC at 0. DARE at 0. Shepherd Family Park at 12,000. The Visitor Information Center at 30,000. And Foothills Tourism Association at 0.
You've missed the handy bus.
Oh, handy bus at 22,400.
Yeah, all correct. I want to come back to council because we went past Shepherd Park real quick and just, I don't, does anybody have, I just want to make sure that nobody has any comments or questions on Shepherd Park. Carol.
Thank you. This is just part of, this is that final installment of the $34,000 that we had approved. So it was given out in two different increments. So it was 11,000, 2019 was it, Leanna, and then 11,000, 2020. So this is the remaining 12,000 of that $34,000 parcel.
That is correct.
Gotcha.
Helen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So is that a recommendation then for that funding that's being specified?
That one's all good.
Okay. So that's community group funding.
That was easy.
Never is. New initiatives. Let's move the slide. So council's seeing all these new initiatives and we'll go through them one by one. This is coming from general taxation, except for the electronic sign. We think we can use, we want to have the conversation with council to use the sponsorship funding from the field house for the $90,000 if that's palatable or not. But we'll start at the top, the Community Engagement Hub. Everybody saw the description that it's an online platform to engage the community. Initial cost at $15,000. And then annually a license fee of $9,000 per year, probably for the next 3 to 5 years. A yes or no to that? Greg, you're on mute if you're talking.
Good.
I saw your lips moving.
What's the end goal with this? What are we looking for?
This would be an online portal that we would engage the community to ask for feedback on different things. It would incorporate the surveys. It would incorporate a way to, in COVID, to engage the public in a better fashion, to have ongoing conversations, to better moderate that social media so we can reduce the rants that we see on our social media aspect of things. Lots of communities are starting to move in this direction, but that would be integrating it with our new website as well, as a kind of a different way to engage the community, since we're seeing their desire to engage online more than in person.
If you think this is going to reduce anything on Facebook, it's not going to happen, but there's other benefits to doing this for sure. Bruce?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. So Chris, I'm just curious, is this like oh gosh, my brain just went away. Is this like the High River, the group that we had up to the end of June?
Oh, no, it'd be different.
Okay.
So this is specifically a software platform called something like Bang the Table is one example. There's Civic Spaces as well that's used quite extensively. It's a different way, and I wish I could bring up an example for you quickly, but I don't have that ability to really source it out. It is certainly a way to be holding online conversations in a very respectful, controlled manner on specific ideas, and exchange those ideas online. And it would try and steer us away. Mayor Snodgrass, you're right. The rants on Facebook are still going to occur, but they don't have to occur under our site. This is a way for us to control it better, so that we get targeted approach from that perspective. So it's just not a complaint session.
Yeah, this would engage much more of a rational thinking
Yes.
mentality than Facebook fights.
And I'm sorry, the initiative, I couldn't remember the name, was our High River. And obviously this is way different than that. So thank you.
Carol?
Thank you. I'm not in favor of this initiative because I think with us already upgrading our website, that I don't think we need this. I don't think we would, I don't think this serves us at all because people will still want to use Facebook, and the rational thinkers who want to communicate directly with the town already do. Because when I really appreciate, Chris, that you attached all of the comments from the survey, because look at that, we even had 286 people fill out an online survey, and we didn't need a community engagement hub to promote that. We just needed it word of mouth, and even in that survey about underneath, how do I like to receive my information? There were still people, quite a few comments that still said they like the town crier. So I don't really think this community engagement hub will serve us at all. And especially that it's an ongoing fee. I don't like that either. So I'm against this initiative.
Yeah, I don't mind the 15K to get it going. It's another 10K a year to keep it alive isn't sitting right. Once you commit, you're in. But Jamie?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Backing up a little bit, these numbers here, we're talking about, this is an impact to current tax rates. Anything that we approve here is going to increase taxes, correct?
That's correct. It either increases taxes or we get the council directs us to go find the money somewhere else within the budget.
I kind of like that. No, okay.
So I'll just, no other hands are up for questions. So question as to whether you're, if you are, I'm going to say against this, then raise your hand.
Oh,
does that make sense?
I think if Mayor Snodgrass, if I could ask, is if you just go around and ask for yes or no from each individual councillor.
Want to do that? Okay.
Yeah, do it recorded. Yeah.
Okay. So far, I've got everybody against with raising their hands, but and I just don't. I'd like to learn more about this, Chris. Yeah. I just don't know that budget-wise today, being new money, whether I'm there. Carol, do you have a question? No. So this one is
no.
A no. That one's a no.
Firefighter standby positions. The intent here is to create 2 standby positions in a 24-hour period, one on the day shift, one on the night shift. This would be used to call in on short notice to fill any vacancies due to illness or other absences. And we're seeing an increase through COVID. We've been seeing increased levels of absences. Anecdotally, it looks like these positions could reduce overtime costs associated with bringing in crews that have already worked or individuals from that perspective. And the overall cost is $21,000 per annum or a 0.1% tax increase. That's the summary. We can certainly get you more information if there's not enough there.
So you're saying if we do this in the long run, could save money?
It could save money. It could be a wash, but I think we need to take a look at that for a year to see if it actually does save us money. I shouldn't say save us money. Makes it a wash, makes it equal. And it gives the fire department some certainty as well, because they've had some scrambling times through COVID to find enough guys to go out in calls, right? So it's been a little bit of a struggle. And even last week when we had a first positive test result for COVID, that caused some scramble within the department to make that happen, right? So it was a little bit of a struggle from that perspective. And this is just with the number of calls that we've seen increasing, and it has been an increasing level of calls in 2020 for sure. It's not a good trend where we're seeing the number of calls heading up from that perspective. And we just need to make sure that the firefighters can respond to a house fire or a rescue or a lift assist from that perspective.
Okay. Michael?
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. Chris, is this the common practice in paid departments? I'm a little bit more familiar with some volunteer situations where they're on call. You're just on call because you're on call. Everybody takes a rotation through it. But in paid departments, this is the common way to kind of curtail the issue that we're seeing.
Oh, well, we're a hybrid department, right? So we got full-time firefighters and we have paid on call. And those paid on call don't necessarily have to take a shift or respond to a call. And those paid on call, that's been the struggle that Cody and Trevor have had to an extent, was those paid on calls can choose not to respond to a call from that perspective, especially if they're at work or if they're in the city. And most of our paid on calls will either live in the city and work out here, so it's hard for them to respond. So this would be kind of targeting a couple of local positions to make sure that we can fill a couple of fire trucks if we need to roll extra fire trucks.
Thanks.
Jamie?
Thank you, Mary. This is one of the core services that we provide to the public in High River, and we, even in my own workplace, we are suffering because of the COVID and people staying home with a sniffle and that sort of thing. So I would,
Jamie,
sorry,
you're
I
on
would
mute.
certainly support the $21,000.
Okay. Okay, so going through the list, verbal, how do you vote? Or Carol, you got a question before we go?
I do, please.
Yeah.
Chris,
Mm-hmm.
is there any way that this could be funded any other way than a tax increase?
Certainly, we can certainly we could use a portion of that surplus, and once we know exactly that number, we could use a portion of that. So we may be able to allocate, we're going to be able to allocate some of our most grant as well to some of the additional costs we've seen through COVID for the addition, like if council remembers, we had that we hired some additional firefighters to offset COVID impacts, and we changed some of our shift rotations. So we could offset some of that cost through most if we can relate this directly for 2021 only to COVID. Beyond 2021, it would have to come either from general taxation or from, it comes from general taxation, how we fund it, if it's a tax increase or if it's coming from cost savings, that's the direction of council that we'll take from that perspective moving forward.
The one thing I do caution with using the most grants, this grant is to only cover costs to March 31st, 2021.
Yeah.
Okay, because I guess that's kind of the question that I was having is, are these positions, would they be needed if we weren't in COVID?
My belief is yes. Just because we've got such a significant number of standby firefighters or paid on call firefighters that don't reside within the community.
Okay, and I appreciate that background because that influences how I'm thinking. So thank you.
Okay, we'll go through the vote. Councillor Moore, yay or nay?
Yay.
Councillor Masterman?
Yep.
Councillor McMillan?
Yes.
Councillor Cooey?
Yes.
Nychuk?
Yes.
Kinghorn?
In favor?
Snodgrass is in favor, unanimous, yes.
Asphalt replacement program. component of asset management, of course. It's targeted at roads that don't require the full replacement of water and sewer mains underneath. So I think this spring, a member of council brought forward 8th Avenue or 8th Street Southeast, I believe, that had roads that were alligating, curbs that were falling apart. But when you take a look at the sewer and water services underneath that, they don't need replacement for the next 15 or 20 years. That this would be targeting those types of roads that are starting to see some failure. No expanded service, but just purely asphalt replacement, no detailed road rehabilitation in the road base, and just replacement of existing asphalt surfaces.
Chris, just to add, it may not actually be a full replacement. We may go with like a emulsion mix or something like that, where we think we can salvage the structure. As we've gone through, we've noticed we have a bit of a gap in some of our maintenance programs where ops takes care of smaller things and engineering typically takes care of bigger things. And these projects in the middle, like the Emerson alligator cracking that came up earlier this year, is kind of in between those two categories, and this, we hope to address that.
Carol?
Thank you. I guess I'm just kind of surprised we don't already have money put away for something like this.
It's one of those things where you're chasing the disaster, right? Just
Yeah.
another level of government that's always trying to chase dealing with the next disaster. And when this stuff comes up, then it comes back to council to pull money out of reserves or something to redo the road. So this would be actually allocating money directly to it to have money available, because it happens pretty much every year.
But I guess I'm just wondering, how did this happen? Like, that there's no money there. Like, this isn't like it's an oddity. Like an asphalt program, I would just automatically think would be part of asset management. Or am I being thick? I don't know.
Well,
I'm just, this
no,
one I was really shocked at.
It's just not a separate, yeah, and you're right. Like,
I know it should be a given.
I think it's, yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. But the way it's always been done in the past was just, and we haven't been doing a lot of just asphalt replacing, because we usually dynamite the whole road and the street and everything. So yeah, no, this would be a new way of kind of doing things, and I think a more transparent and easy way to follow this as well.
And it would be a similar program like the sidewalk replacement and pathway replacement program that council funds, I think, for around $250,000 per annum. It'd be kind of operated the same method as that, with specific projects being reinvested that don't require full-on road-based replacement or different alternate measures, be it emulsions, be it micro surfacing, be it seal coating, be it whatever, from that perspective. So it would be purely focused on the road surface, nothing underneath it, and moving forward. But it'd be managed the same way as our sidewalk enhancement program or sidewalk replacement program, that we allocate $250,000 per annum to it.
Learn something new every day. I really just can't get over this. So, okay.
I thought you'd have caught that in the previous 7,000-page budget documents if you've gone through with a fine-tooth comb. Anyways,
and the mayor's correct. We've focused on dynamiting roads up, doing all three levels of service, right? And not for these one-off larger scale patches, fixing a cul-de-sac, whatever it may be. And so this is kind of increasing the level of service.
Okay, so that, yeah, it's an increase to level of service for sure at a 0.5% tax increase. So I'm keeping a running tally. We approve this, we're at 0.6. I don't know if any counselor's got a number in their head as far as tax increase as to what you're thinking of, but with this addition, we'd be at, and we can always come back and, if we get through this list, we can always come back and nick something off of here. So this would be a 0.5%, so we would be at 0.6% tax increase with this one. So I'll ask for the vote because I don't have any other hands up. So Councillor Moore?
I'm in favor. Could I just make one point also that even as we go through this list and get the 0.5 or the 0.1 or whatever, I have to remember that on the previous list, which was the community group funding, we had $801,000, but we reduced that by 46.3 thousand. And that was already included in the 0% budget. So we've actually got a little bit to work with. And these numbers don't exactly say that it's going to be a total budget increase.
Correct. Because we already got like 46K to play with.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
That's new information we didn't have to start when we started this process.
Yep. Okay. Okay. So the vote. Don says yes. Masterman.
Yeah, Mayor Snodgrass, I'm in favor. I guess kind of along the lines of what we just talked about now. I believe in the past, Leanna has been able to kind of keep a running tally and just keep refreshing her numbers so that we kind of know where we are. Like Don pointed out, you know, we were 46,000 to the good, and now we just, you know, adding some, and if we could just kind of be kept updated as to where we are in this whole process, if that's possible, that would be really helpful to me, at least.
I wasn't quite prepared for that. I had started that, but I could work on this as we're going through things.
If you can, Leanna, I think we can, you know, this is all coming back to us for a final decision and a motion and stuff. So we'll get that, but I think we can get a 46K to play with is about a 0.25, not even. %.
It's about 0.3.
About 0.3?
Yeah. Okay. So running total right now, you've added $121,000 to the budget based upon the last two, and you've saved $46,300 so far.
You want to receive?
No, I guess we received that. He said they could also take
So currently we're at 74.7 is what we've added to the budget.
No, he's back. You're on mute, Craig.
Yeah, I got off. Here we are. Okay, so Carol, your vote.
In favor.
Cooey?
In favor?
Nychuk?
Yes, in favor.
Kinghorn?
In favor.
Unanimous yes to that one. You know, that's one of those programs that really irritates people in your community, that just a little bit of asphalt is a nightmare to get replaced. So I think that's a good one.
Yeah, it has big benefit and big positives when we start doing it.
You got her.
Electronic sign replacement. And I think this is a bigger conversation because it's probably a conversation about electronic signs in general, tied into our wayfinding program. That being said, this sign in front of BSRC is being not in operation for some time and has now got outdated technology in it. So the proposal that's before you is a full replacement with the potential to offer rental of the space for generation of revenue. And I'll have to say that's probably a marginal number from that perspective. But what came to light last week when we were talking about reserve funds was we had this $94,000 in sponsorship for the Fieldhouse project that we don't seem to be wanting to assign it to anything. And I wanted to bring that forward to see whether or not it's worth using it for this sign as associated with the Fieldhouse project or not. If it's not, then it has to go back into a tax cost, which is almost a 1% tax increase if we're going to fund it from that perspective, or we tie this $90,000 into the wayfinding program and work forward with a joint program that's consistent with our signage program throughout the community from that perspective. So lots of options. And this is what the program is to replace that sign at $90,000.
Carol?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and thanks, Chris. I for sure do not want to see a tax implication for this particular item. I have a couple of questions. I guess my one comment is, I'm just surprised when it's to update the software when Home Hardware's electronic sign has been working fine for years. So I was just wondering what software they use for their sign, because they, it's been functioning. I walk by there all the time, and actually I get a lot of my news from the Home Hardware sign more than the Bob Snodgrass would. So I'm just kind of curious about that. So that would be one question. And then my second question is, how are you thinking about electronic signs as far as the wayfinding? Because I'm not a big fan of electronic signs to begin with. I don't like the light pollution. Yeah. And so I would like to hear your comments about the wayfinding program, but also like my first question about why this is even on here.
Yeah, and I'll start off. I'm not a huge fan of backlit signs or LED signs, but I think what I learned through the COVID crisis this spring, as well as the flood preparations, having those vehicle mounted LED board signs, there might be the devil that you want to know is an LCD sign that's properly managed, that's more fits in aesthetically better with your community and designed appropriately than having a whole bunch of VMBs around town through parts of the year advertising safety or those types of things outside of construction projects. So how do we integrate proper design and urban design in with these LCD signs that are, one, they're efficient, we can reduce the light pollution that they emit, and we can make them convey proper messages in a better format than what we have been doing. I'm not a huge fan of them either. I don't think any community wants to be Vegas. There's only one Vegas in the world, and that's a reason why they do that. But I think there are tangible purposes for them. And I think if they're used appropriately and used effectively, they can be integrated well into the urban scape that we have to convey the messaging that we want to deal with. Now, that's a nice, fun, fluffy answer, Carol. I'll be clear, because I think it all depends on the design of the signage and how we integrate them and how big we make them. And that goes for this one too. Is this an outright replacement? Because it's a technological, I won't say it's all software, but I certainly think that there's a lot of drivers and a lot of the parts and pieces inside the sign that need to be replaced that make it expensive. But I think integrating LCD signs in key locations through your community, not a huge number, probably no more than 3, can give you a great opportunity to share messages a little bit better with the community from that perspective, instead of having vehicle mounted board signs all through the community as well during certain parts of the year. So that was just a thought, something that we learned through this spring from March on, that we had VMBs out from March until end of June, then we took them away from that perspective to convey safety messages. So just something that we learned.
So I have been doing kind of an informal poll, asking people how they even noticed. They didn't even know the sign was out because they don't even see it half the time. It's very small. The sign is very short. I'm a short person, and if I'm saying it's short, it's really a short sign. And now with that sculpture in front too, I don't think that sign's even placed at a spot that encourages people to actually look at it, unless you're a pedestrian, because you're just going. There's not a stoplight there. And I think where I'm at with this, I prefer those, as far as an emergency situation, I prefer the ones that are temporary, because it jigs me. I recognize that there's something different on the landscape now when all of a sudden those portable ones start showing up. If something's permanent, you start dismissing it. And I sure wouldn't want important emergency messaging on a sign that we've now become so conditioned that we don't even realize it exists anymore. So that's where I'm coming from with this, because I think we just get complacent. It's like, oh, it's there. Because, you know, for the longest time, I didn't even realize it wasn't working, because like I said, I pay more attention to Home Hardware. I was actually going to request that maybe the town could set up a deal with Home Hardware to advertise our programs, because it's just a bit more visible just where it's at actually. So thank you.
Yeah, and Councillor McMillan, I think I agree with you with the BSRC sign. I think the location needs to be worked on. I think it is from a design perspective, probably not designed. It's not designed for vehicles, and that's probably the key perspective, is that it's not designed for vehicles. It's not designed for the speeds that we're seeing on 12th. It's not designed for a 4-lane road either. So if you are going to make a commitment to build and replace it, then it either needs to be a building mounted sign from that perspective on the face of the building that's at a higher elevation, or you need to put it closer to the road as well as make it larger, which then, you know, increase your cost from that perspective. So, you know, I think where it's located right now, you know, beautiful sculpture, and I think that should be the highlight. But the signage within it, it gets hidden really easily. And once you get a couple of vehicles or trees grow up around it, it gets even more hidden from that perspective.
Councillor Cooey.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. I agree with you, Chris. I think these can be effective in the right locations with the right messaging. I also agree with Councillor McMillan. I would still like to see in emergency situations the portable signs up, because they are a distraction, or they are that differentiation in the landscape. But I do think these can be a really effective tool in communicating things that are going in our community. I don't think they should come from tax dollars. I know, and maybe we never will understand the rationale or the restrictions around using that sponsorship money. And maybe, I mean, based on the timing that it happened, I think it was early 2014. Maybe there weren't too many. It was just kind of get things done and get that building open, because it was such a blight in our community. So I just, if there are any restrictions, I would just like to understand if there are any. I do think it should also, though, be incorporated. Whatever we do with this sign needs to be incorporated into our wayfinding. I don't think it makes sense, knowing that the wayfinding signage program is on the horizon, that we would not ensure that this is part of that planning. Not necessarily part of the budget, but part of the planning for sure.
No other questions. So I don't like these LED signs around town. I don't like any of them. So that one over by you, Carol, is crazy bright. That thing is, luckily it's got a Christmas display across the street that kind of minimizes what you really look at now. But I tell you what, I don't like them, and I would support dollars for this one at the rec center to be removed. I'm not going to support dollars to fix it. So, and I'm 100% with Carol and Kathy. It's just one of those signs that those of us that live here, you don't even notice it. You drive by it 30,000 times, you don't notice it. You could have the flood emergency on there, and I would never see it. That's why I like those. I like the portable ones, because just like Carol says, it's a change, and you look at it and you read it. So I'm not a fan of these kinds of signs, so I'm voting against any money to fix this one. So no other questions. Councillor Moore, your vote.
No.
No. Masterman,
No, Mayor Snodgrass.
McMillan,
No.
Cooey,
No.
Nychuk,
Opposed?
Kinghorn,
Against.
go. Continue on, River Gauge.
So currently, some summary, currently we maintain all the river gauge stations, get them up and running. Kent and Jason go out every spring. We've had certain struggles with the satellites and some of the remoteness of these locations. And the goal would be to have some dependency. First off, I guess the first question is, are these valuable from a council perspective to keep maintaining these gauge stations or not? If they're not, then this is a moot point. We don't need to continue on this conversation. But if it is important, our proposal before you is to contract out the maintenance and the operation of these electronic river gauge stations on a 3-year term. At about a $30,000 cost per annum from that perspective, and reduce our staff contribution to that, to the maintenance of those stations each spring and each fall.
Thanks, Chris. Bruce.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. So Chris, I'm just wondering, I think I know the answer to this, but can you tell me the locations of those 3 stations?
You're testing me, Bruce. Riley, could you jump in?
So Bruce, we have one at Highwood House. We have one on the highway bridge. So is that 22 at Longview? And then the last one is at the east end of Hog Park.
Sorry, at the east end of Hog Park?
Correct.
Okay, I thought that one was taken out, Riley. But no, that's good to know. Thank you.
Is there not another one below the Center Street Bridge, below the little bow intake? Right?
There is, but that's actually ran by Environment.
Oh, okay.
So we don't have anything to do with that. We get the numbers off the webpage.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Michael.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. Thanks for giving those locations, Riley, and good question, Councillor Masterman. Are there, other than the one under the bridge, what other ones are is the province running? Because to me, river monitoring might be more appropriately suited to the province and not just to us going upstream with these things. I understand the importance of having it. I'm not debating the importance of why those are there, but obviously significant costs. And if we're duplicating efforts that already the province is doing with their multiple monitoring programs, there's even an app that I have on my phone that I can look at that's controlled by the province. So, are we duplicating efforts and energy and therefore dollars towards something like this?
No, the other station upstream is actually on Diebels, which is it feeds into the Highwood. So there isn't really duplication. And if you wanted what a true representation of what the Highwood is doing, you're actually mostly reliant on our 3 stations. Environment doesn't take our numbers either. So, I mean, our numbers don't go anywhere. They're solely for our use only.
So is there an opportunity to push this to the province? Obviously, they invested a significant amount of money in our community to help us, mitigate against flood risk.
They have no interest to be involved with our gauge stations, whether it's taking them over or even getting the data. They don't want to be involved with them.
So where do we get the approvals for where we put these gauge stations? Do we have agreements with the property owners, or is there agreements with the province, or how do we? Sorry for the question.
Oh, now you're really testing me. We have permits to have them in place. I can't remember Hog Park. Hog Park must be with the county. And then the other 2 are with AT because they're on bridges. And I know we did go through that process with AT and get a license to put the stations there. And they all have environmental approvals that go with them as well.
Okay, and then, sorry, last question. At 30 grand a year to maintain this, what are we getting for 30K a year? That seems like a lot to,
And so
preventative
it's actually not 30 because there's actually another 30 in the budget already. And so they do need maintenance of some sort. So for example, and we don't typically use it. We have to do, so for example, the one has have a requirement for basically a dehumidifier pellets. And we have to refill those periodically. The bubbler, the hoses periodically need to be replaced. So we do that. We sometimes have issues with the hardware and need that replaced. If the flows ever got high enough, and they haven't since we installed them, we actually would like to go and do, to actually measure the river while it's higher, to redo calibration on them, because you're supposed to redo calibration periodically. And the more you do that, the more accurate the stations are. And since we'll put them in, the flows have never gotten high enough to actually make that worthwhile. So there is that existing 30, and it's kind of sporadic in terms of how much of that we use, but this 30 is specifically to lessen Kent's time and lessen Jason's time in terms of having a contractor do the maintenance. Sorry, the other big piece is there's solar. So there's battery maintenance and solar panel maintenance and battery replacement, which is a fair amount of work as well. So, so it's actually two pies. We actually already have a maintenance budget. Now we're looking for a budget to actually contract out a bunch of the work and to keep them up and running. In terms of what they give us the flows while the channel is open. So when there's no ice, we get flow values from the river in those 3 locations. And that's really all it does, to be honest. It was originally, so after the flood, it was identified as an issue that upstream flows were they were slow coming in for the province because the province wanted to screen them first, but also in terms of providing enough notification and where the data was coming from was of concern. So we installed the stations because they're ours, we get instant access, and B, it was very targeted with the locations to make sure it gave us numbers that were valuable to us in terms of that upstream warnings. So does that help, Mike?
thanks, Riley.
So Riley, these were installed post-flood, kind of in response to the province's stations were not reliable at that time. They were wiped out and we couldn't get numbers, etc. So this would just give us another kind of fail safe on having our own eyes on what's happening on the river, rather than, like you say, going back to Alberta Environment or whoever to try to decipher what's actually happening. And that results in its own set of delays to get those numbers back, whether you ever do in time. And with as fast as 2013 happened, having our own eyes on that river upstream is critical. It's part of the safety and security of this town. So, Carol.
Thank you. I really agree with Councillor Nychuk about this. And I guess also speaking to your comments, Mayor Snodgrass, about having our own eyes. I guess my thing is I feel comfortable that it's Jason and Kent doing this. I just kind of question how we would trust an outside contractor who perhaps doesn't have the same deep concern. And that's just like an observation. I guess where I'm also coming from with this is twofold. I think this should then be a partnership. If we're to incur this cost, I think the county should be involved because they benefit from it as well. But also, Chris, is there some sort of grant that we could apply for this one? Because I would think that there should be some sort of environmental water or safety type of funds instead of it going to a tax increase?
I don't think there is, but it's not to say that we can't take another look at that one, Councillor McMillan, and see if there is something hidden in a grant kind of program somewhere else from that perspective. So we can certainly take a look at it and see if we can find another grant stream, be it federally or provincially, from that perspective.
And like, is Jason on this meeting? Is he available?
No.
Okay, because I would really like to hear from him actually about this. Like, I always really value his input about anything water related, and I just guess I'd kind of like to hear why he and Kent feel that this is like, I guess I just would like to hear from him. Like, is there any way?
Is Kent available? Kent's on here.
Right. And so I really appreciate that, Kent, as well as, do you have a specific contractor in mind? Okay, well, thank you.
Yes, Kent would have to look into it and figure out if there's enough synergies with what we're already doing in some of our other facilities that we could extend an existing contract or it'd be all new.
And right, because I just really put a lot of my faith in you and Jason for this, and I just would want to make sure that this is going to be a fiscally responsible thing where it's not something that then, oh, we under costed it. And I guess I'd like to hear from other members of council. Like, do you feel that the county should be part of this as well, or like a kind of a cost sharing, or?
No.
No?
I don't. I think this is our responsibility for our community, and I think these are our stations, and number one, I don't think you're going to get it out of them, and I think this is our responsibility. We've yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, well, thank you.
Bruce.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. No, I totally agree with Mayor Snodgrass on that. I think when we approved these stations years ago, you know, we did it to give High River a way better early warning system. You know, certainly, you know, should environment only be doing it? Yeah, probably, but I think we have a responsibility. We have a vested interest in that we're right on this river, and after the initial capital expense, like as Riley said, that the first one on the Highwood is right near Highwood House. So there's I believe there's one on Cataract Creek, which just off the forestry trunk south of Highwood House, but that's not the Highwood proper. So I just think that we need to maintain these things. I think it's important that we do that. We owe it to our citizens. You know, should and honestly, I think to talk about involving the county in some kind of cost sharing, I think we're we're dreaming, and because they have other priorities, between High River and headwaters. And so, you know, I think this is on us, and I think we've got to do. I think we've got to do whatever we can do to make sure that we have this early warning system operating and reliable, and so that you know, when 2013 happens again, you know, that level of water coming from the west, you know, that we know about it as early as possible, and not getting phone calls in the middle of the night from Longview. So thanks.
All right, Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Just to set the record straight a little bit regarding eyes on the river, the monitoring station at Hog Park was actually owned by the town and run by the town in 2013. Unfortunately, it was washed out, so it didn't give any advance warning to us.
You're on mute, Craig.
Thank you. To the vote, Councillor Moore, yea or nay?
Nay.
Nay. Masterman?
Yes.
Cooey?
Nixon and I say yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Where am I at here? Michael, sorry.
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
Thank you. Passes.
The next one is youth engagement person for the Bob Snodgrass Recreation Complex. As council's aware, we had some issues last year during, on weekends in particular, during Flyers home games about youth and vandalism, as well as increased kind of like, I guess they had like a little bit of a fight club that took place in the parking lot as well, and caused conflict with our facility operators and the public as well. And so we were concerned about the customer experience. We explored different opportunities, including increasing enforcement and RCMP presence. And we came to the conclusion that this might be a better proposal to try and engage the youth at that location. So the business cases within your binder that was circulated at about a $32,000 cost a year to start, and then a $31,000 per year thereafter, or a 0.2% tax increase from that perspective. Now, bear in mind, the recreation complex for the foreseeable future has a decreased capacity and very specific user groups. So no Flyers games causing those kind of problems. And certainly into the early part of 2021, we don't see that increase. So that could change the number here from that perspective. But it's something to bring forward for council conversation and whether or not it gets approved.
No hands up. Personally, I would like to revisit this one next year, if we're around. And that's just for the reasons that you just said, Chris, that, you know, there's not a lot going on, and it's closed right now, and just to see enough. I question whether just having another staff person there is actually going to alleviate that problem with what we had last year. That's more of a uniformed security guy that these kids will pay attention to, not just the Town of High River Recreation Center staffer. We know how they got treated last time, and just to have another one that's, I don't know, thinking they're gonna, I don't know. I just got questions on it, but I'm gonna say no to this and revisit it next year. That's my own vote. But Councillor Nychuk.
Thanks, Chris Snodgrass. I guess I'm kind of following up with you. the problems that happen are coming from, in my opinion, individuals that aren't going to participate in programs or leadership from an advisory role. They're unfortunately, I believe probably a lot more far gone than that. You know, and to Mayor Snodgrass's point about uniform security, that may or may not be a better solution. I don't know, but I'm in favor of revisiting this again next year and discussing it more fully to understand really what the problem is and what the potential solutions are, rather than it just being a new initiative line item. I'd just like a little bit more in depth into it if we could. That's where I'm at. Thank you.
Bruce.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. I'll be quick. I do support the idea of maybe not deciding that this year, but when I first saw this, I have to say there was a part of me that thought the people who were being so troublesome last winter, they're not going to be deterred by somebody who's trying to give them other things to do there. Part of me says that and thinks that, and the other part of me that goes back, I won't tell you how many years, but quite a number of years, when I was a youth group leader in this town for a number of years, affiliated with one of the churches. And then I was involved with junior forest wardens, and just to give young people an opportunity to do things that they enjoy doing, that really, you know, so, I mean, it's similar to scouts, and of course I was a former scout and cub and all that as well. But I mean, just to give them options. You know, we had, and I won't name names, but I'm sure, you know, Kathy and Craig would, if I said some of the names of some of the.
You bet. Good. Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry about the little glitch. We had a crash at the town office on the IT end, so they're getting things up and running. We'll wait for Chris to jump back in here, but I'll go back to Carol talking about herbicides.
Thank you very much. I'd like as much of a natural approach as possible. I'm not a huge fan of extreme use of chemicals, and there are some benefits to having, you know, some of the things that we think that are weeds can also be beneficial as far as bees and pollination. So I would support a more natural approach. I'm not necessarily saying that it all has to go, but I wouldn't really, I'm against harsh chemical use.
Okay. Because we haven't had a solid conversation about this, and with you know, with Darlene or others kind of giving us a presentation on this use, I'd rather just almost skip this one for now. I just don't think, I think we've all got our personal opinions on this right now. But you know, we kind of blocked it this spring because of spraying around the goslings and stuff. And then after we did that, then I got feedback, well, that's not a big deal. We just adjust when we're going to spray, right? You know, you can do it in the fall, which is a lot better for actually killing weeds. But I just think we need more information. Like there's nothing on this thing for money expenditures. There's just zero. So I don't know if they just put it as a placeholder for the discussion, which I'm assuming is it is, but I don't know that we can have that right here, right now, without the right people at the table. You okay with that? Skip it? Okay.
So that takes us to the end of new initiatives. So with all the changes so far, where we had the reduction in our community groups of 46,300, and then the approval of the firefighter standby position for 21,000, the asphalt replacement program for 100,000, and the gauge station maintenance for 30,000. That's a total increase of 104,700. We can discuss as we get through the rest of this, how we want to fund this. Are we going to do this as an increase to taxes? Are we going to look for other savings within the operating budget? I see Chris is just joining. And so at this point, we're at basically 0.52% tax increase.
Okay. Thanks, Leanna. So Chris, just to rewind, now that you're back in, the Parks Turf thing and the what we would like to do is get a better presentation to have the proper conversation from Darlene and different ways that we can do this so that we're all just have a meeting dedicated to that at a Cal meeting or something so that we can get better educated on it. I sure need it. So
It's a bigger philosophical conversation in its entirety, and it links into sustainability and environmental protection as well. So
okay.
It's a very big conversation.
Okay. Can you share your screen again, Chris? That was
I'm just in the process of
trying to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be new initiatives all over.
Correct.
So capital projects. Do we want to take a quick break, a bio break?
Sure. 5 minutes, good.
It's 5 minutes work for everybody. Please put your computers on mute and shut your cameras off. Just
safety first. Good to go, Chris?
Ready to go, Mayor Snodgrass?
Yeah.
So now we'll move on to capital projects, and hopefully we can, I know time is, it's 4 o'clock right now. I don't want to keep you much past 4:30. But if we can roll through this, that'd be great from a clarity perspective. And I don't know what best way for council would like to go through this. Would they like to go through a project by project or by group by group? But you let me know what you'd like to see, and stop me if you have any questions.
Chris, I think the ones that are carryovers,
Yeah.
you know, like the fire hall expansion, you know, well, we're not going to say no to that. Well, maybe.
You could.
Maybe. The way it's going. So the ones that are carryovers, I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on it. If there's a counselor that has got major issues with one of them, then definitely speak up. But I think if we're going to spend time on anything, it's making sure the new capital projects, we want to make sure that those are talked about.
Perfect. So then I'll move to the first new capital project. It's under Fire and Emergency Services, and it's the self-contained breathing apparatus equipment. And this is refitting the fire department with new breathing apparatus at a cost of $380,000 coming from the Community Infrastructure Reinvestment Fund. This is going to be a joint purchase between some outlying communities as well as the county, and trying to get purchasing power from that perspective. Any questions on that one? The next new one would be completion of the roof complex at the recreation complex roof replacement phase 3. This would be the next phase. I think we've done 2 phases so far at $214,500 funded from gas tax, the federal gas tax fund. More work at BSRC, and this is the HVAC distribution system restoration. So improvements to the HVAC operation to increase airflow and to reset it from that perspective, and to turn over the air faster. So it's about $40,000 cost from that perspective. BSRC rooftop access improvements. It goes hand in hand with the roof replacement. Staff right now have a difficulty getting to the roof. This would be easing the roof access so it's safer for them, and easier to get up with materials at $50,000. And this is coming from MSI. Last week, we got our letter from the curling slab regarding the curling slab and leisure ice surface replacement from the province. So this is replacing the slabs in the curling rinks and the small arena at $1.1 or $1.7 million, and it's coming from the municipal stimulus program. Sunshine Lake gazebo replacement. This would be replacing 1 gazebo at Sunshine Lake at a total cost of $130,000 funded from the MSI. Cemetery ribbons, install cemetery ribbons along for headstone replacement at the cemetery. It's a total cost of $30,000, and it's coming from the Community Infrastructure Reinvestment Fund. Under operational services, you see $537,000 in total. The majority of that is coming for new equipment, including a one-ton dump truck at $55,000, a tandem dump truck at $170,000, a half-ton pickup at $37,000, and a front-end loader at $275,000. All funded from SURF. Improving the yard security at the operations building. We've had some thefts there, and this would be improving the gate at about $10,000, and there's a carryover of $7,000 for some other minor improvements as well that's not showing up here. And that's funded from MSI. Pedestrian improvements.
Chris?
Yep.
Just to stop you there, we're obviously replacing a number of pieces of equipment out there, 5 or 4 to be exact. Are we going to be disposing of existing stuff like the old front end loader and that sort of thing, or is there a plan for that? Or is this just additional equipment?
Riley, can you provide clarity on that? I believe it's disposing of it, but I want to be sure.
I'd have to, typically it's always disposal. I'd have to check, but I know the front end for loader for sure is a disposal, as well as I believe the tandem and Looking at the list, I'm pretty sure it's all disposal. I can double check, but at this point, yes, disposal.
Riley, they are all disposals.
Oh, thank you, Leanna.
You're welcome. Just want to make sure you
Awesome.
guys know I'm awake.
Thank you.
And Councillor Kinghorn, that would follow the policy that council adopted last week for surplus equipment disposal.
Okay, so now how does that money get tracked back? Like if we're approving $275,000 for a front end loader, and I don't know what the existing one's worth, 80K say.
It'll all depend on what our net book value is. Quite often we see either a gain or a loss on sale of disposal. Hopefully we are getting a gain on most pieces of equipment, but quite often it's pretty close to a wash. In all honesty, we're normally seeing on an annual basis about $30,000 to $40,000 in gains, and that just goes into the surplus at the end of the year.
Okay, goes into surplus. Okay, thank you. That's what I needed.
New project. Next one is pedestrian improvements, and we'll be developing that list and bringing it to council for their information. This is primarily a concrete program next year, not asphalt, at $250,000 funded from the gas tax. 24th Street top lift. There's some unknowns here a little bit. We had $500,000 or $600,000 in total, including $50,000 for geotech review and design. We've increased that slightly by $100,000 coming from SURF. We think that'll be sufficient to cover the cost of level course because there are some significant changes in elevation from the center to the curb edge. And it's about 1.6 kilometers in length, the total length of the road. So we feel $700,000 will be more than sufficient and increase that by $100,000. And this is that project that Mayor Snodgrass brought forward last time, wants to be done. And if we can get early approval to get the geotech and the design done, we can get better cost surety moving forward from the takeoffs from the surveyors for the level course.
That was Councillor Masterman's baby initially.
Okay.
Just to give where credit's due, right? Councillor Masterman, you got a question?
Yeah, just a very quick one, Mayor Snodgrass. So, Chris, yeah, it's good to see that still on the list. And again, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I believe the developer put $160,000 or so into this many years ago, and I assume that money was kind of swallowed up at the time into general revenue or whatever. So it wouldn't be playing a factor in this at all, would it?
No, it wouldn't. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
I forgot to put carryover on the next project under utilities. It's the 4th Avenue main replacement. This is the one we put on hold because of foundation issues with the surrounding homes. So that's a carryover. So my apologies on that one.
Okay, good.
Main lift downstream piping. This has been an on again, off again project. Riley can provide some more details on it, but it's the downstream piping coming into the main lift and correcting that. It's for a cost of $450,000.
Does that fix the stink?
No.
This is that project that we've come back to council a number of times, looking for more funds, where we have done a bunch of work that did not work. So basically, we're closing off all those other capital projects, returning whatever leftover funding is left on those projects, and asking for new funding for the downstream piping.
Okay.
Wastewater treatment plant design, new project. This is funding from the wastewater reserve and offsite levies, $2 million cost. We've submitted a grant application, or will be submitting a grant application at the end of, well, today actually, being submitted to the province in the hopes that we get that, which will cover some of the cost designs if we get the grant. If not, we'll have the design ready to go, and council can make the decision for future construction in 2022 or 2023 at that time.
Michael, you had your hand up for a second. Do you need?
Well, it was related back to that downstream pipe.
Yeah.
And it was just, is this 450 finally going to fix it, or? It just keeps rearing its ugly head. So it'd be nice if we could address it and be done with it.
And my question is, what is it that it's going to do?
So I can be specific about what it does. This is, so last summer, we dug it up. We were all prepared to put the new pipe in, but there were issues with how the old pipe was installed. It was essentially squished, so it was oval. So our new pipe, which is still perfectly round, wouldn't line up. And as a result, we're going to have a bit bigger scope in terms of that work. And so at that time, what we did is we just buried it in concrete, which should hold everything together until we can come back and fix it. And so it stems back to that pipe being essentially ovaled when we dug it up, and we were expecting something a little more round.
Okay.
Sorry, and it's downstream. So this is essentially the force main between the #1 lift and the lagoons. So it's
okay, so it's down there.
It's that main pipe that goes between the two facilities.
And that's why this won't fix the stink.
Correct, because to address the stink, we'd have to go upstream.
Find the stink, follow the stink. Councillor Kinghorn.
Almost my words exactly, Mayor. We need a line on here that says fix the stink. I mean, we've been dealing with that since 2010, since I first went on council, and we still can't get that fixed. So I don't know what it is, and I know this is probably new to you, Chris, but over on that side of town, there are days it just reeks.
Sure does stink.
And Riley, is there a fix to that? Like, is there something that we could do to fix that stink?
Just a matter of money.
Okay, how much?
So we did address it at one point using basically an additive to the sewage. So what's happening is our sewage goes, particularly in these developments that aren't built out, that have the force main built. And so if you have, Montrose is a great example, you have a rather large development with only a portion of the houses, but you have a force main that's sized for the ultimate development. So what happens is your sewage sits in this pipe for a lot longer than it's intended. It goes anaerobic, it becomes very smelly. So you can add additives to the sewage before it goes into that pipe that cut that smell down. But yeah, there is an operational cost associated with that. We've tried some different products with different successes, depending on pricing and whatnot. And if we're moving enough, we cut back how much we're using. But that's something we could revisit again and bring back.
Okay. I think that's another one of these, it's like 24th Street, right? It's been lurking out there for decade now, and it's tough to deal with. There's stuff to put new money to it, but it's just another one of those things where sometimes we got to go back and correct things that have happened in the past, and for a number of reasons. Montrose isn't built out. That's the biggest problem with that whole pipe. So I don't know, this is one that we should put on the radar, Chris, to discuss this coming year as to what the heck we can do, because it's just gross. Nobody wants to live in, it is worse than the feedlot. Say the feedlot all you want. Yeah, that's cow. But
so
this is us.
Is the issue still that 5th Street is where we're getting the concerns from, still mainly that 5th Street vault there?
Anywhere around that entrance to Rio Vista area, anywhere around, all the way west and east. West to 5th and east to wherever. Or east to 5th, west to wherever.
Do we have any specific manholes, or, besides the lift station itself, is there other manholes that it may be coming from as well, or do we know that?
I think it comes directly from the station.
Mayor Snodgrass, may I speak to this?
Yeah, you probably could.
Yeah, it's definitely bad by the station, but it is absolutely horrible on the corner of First Ave and 5th Street Southeast. Like, I really feel bad in particular for that corner house. And but you know, it's so bad you can even just taste it, and it's consistent. Like, it's just all the time. So that's definitely a bad one. But you know, when I'm on my walks, it's quite strong everywhere. But that is a really bad one.
Let's get that on the radar for just to start diving into that one a little thicker, Chris.
Okay.
Let's go get our feet wet on that one.
You can.
No.
Well, I just kind of have a running joke because I have to, because I live close by. It's quite the sewer harpies down there. If anyone's ever read Christopher Moore books, it's like, I just thought when he talked about sewer harpies, I'm like, yeah, there's sewer harpies down there for sure.
Okay, we got it on a list somewhere.
Next one is the airport taxiway enhancements. We received a grant for $120,000, and then the county and ourselves have to kick in the other $40,000. So our contribution will be 20. It is coming through our books, and the county is going to oversee construction and design of it. And we'll be doing the financial payments and managing the grant. And then the final one,
Chris.
Yeah.
My understanding is that the funding coming from the government from the province is going to be supplemented by reserve funds that the airport has. I was not under the understanding that the town and MD were going to pay anything towards this.
Yeah, well, it's how the grant is worded is that we have to come up with our cost share of 20, where it comes from, Councillor Kinghorn. If it comes from the reserve from the airport, then that's just coming from their reserve and being contributed to us, but it flows through our books and it counts as the county contribution.
Okay, we should make a note of that for the next meeting that's going to happen.
Okay, and that's this Wednesday, right?
Yes, thank you. Well, it actually could be at IMC because the airport is going to be on IMC as well.
And then the last one, which is a big ticket item, about $12 million. We just got a letter, signed the grant agreement last week for renewal. We're just finalizing and confirming all the projects and making sure all the descriptions match. So when council sees that, it'll be based upon that priority list that council approved. So that's the first of 3 grants that we asked for extensions on. The LTR we're still waiting for. Well, 2 of the 3 we're still waiting for extensions on. But this is the AEP grant for renewal. That is the $12 million that we have from that perspective. So that's the capital plan. With that $12 million, it is a $28 million capital program, which is overwhelming from that perspective. That being said, we are hearing some good news from the province about some of our staff grants, but we'll see if that actually comes to fruition from the province. Any questions?
Yeah, taking out the renewal and flood mitigation, because we've always kind of run things separate, even though in these budgets, but for the community, you know, we're really looking at a $16 million capital plan for what's actually going on outside of renewal stuff. So with a lot of very, very good things in here, and lots that are carryovers, funding that already exists, and not a whole bunch of new money. So I think the capital plan looks very good, and you guys have done a heck of a job of listening to our requests and getting us down to where it's palatable. So well done, Chris. Leanna.
That's the rest of the staff.
You got her. Everybody involved, which is everybody.
Any questions about any of the projects, carryovers, or new projects from any member of council? None? Okay. One thing we wanted to get into a little bit more detail today was the assessment changes and their impacts. In particular, we kind of showed it to you the last 2 meetings, but you know, the assessment has declined and shifted slightly. And even in a revenue neutral basis, taxes to the average assessment will increase. So for residential, the average assessment is $300,000. For that that totals to be a $28.11 increase per annum. For non-residential, that's municipal portion only, not the non-municipal portion for the province. For non-residential, $900,000 average assessment, which would equate to $115.72 per annum increase on the municipal portion side of things. So we wanted to ask the question, does council wish to adjust the tax rates to reflect a true 0% tax increase, or maintain the revenue neutral approach that we've balanced the budget with?
Oh, well, I think personally the revenue neutral, which is where we've been trying to keep this thing, the assessment stuff is largely out of our control with things. And if we start to play with this, then we've to reflect a true 0% tax increase is going to be difficult in my mind, and will take a lot of work to recoup in the next few years. Correct?
Exactly. Yeah, that is very true, Mayor Snodgrass. And we wanted to bring this to your guys' attention because we've been talking about this and the revenue neutral approach and the 0%. We wanted to make it clear to the public that even though we have a 0% tax increase, because of the assessment shift, their tax implications will be going up ever so slightly. You know, it equates to $2.50-ish a month on the residential side of things, and a little bit more on the non-residential side of things. Now, when we get the total tax aspect of things, when we get the requisitions from the province, we see, you know, $14.52 per household for residential on the average of $300,000, almost $200 per annum on the commercial side of things from the province for education and seniors requisitions. So a substantially bigger hit on the provincial side of things going to the commercial or the non-residential assessment base. So that's a significant increase, but it's not to say we can't do it, but it would be difficult to manage this from that perspective. And that's why we adopted the revenue neutral approach from that perspective. Any questions about that assessment shift? Is everybody understand and clear?
Got it. Oh, Carol, sorry. Question from Carol.
Okay.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, what would have to be done to get it to a true zero? Like, is that when you would go back into the budget and look for more cost efficiencies, or just out of curiosity?
Sure, that's one way we could do it. You know, that's probably the easier way to do it. Probably the other way is to, you know, take a serious look at our mill rates and adjust our mill rates. And now that's just on the average assessment, right? So people that increase by more than the average are going to see a much bigger tax impact at a zero as well, right? And even if we got it to a true zero, they would still see an increase take place on their taxes. So it's hard to make sure that across the board that it's a zero, but we can work towards the average from that perspective. But it would take us, probably the easiest way is to go back in and find cost savings to reduce it by, you know, I think this number is about $180,000-ish, $120,000-ish kind of framework. And so we'd have to go back and find that funding from that perspective. So that's the easiest way. The other way is to just kind of play around with the mill rate and shift it. You'd end up shifting the tax burden a bit more from that perspective around to other higher assessment values.
Right, and then that's just more like a shell game anyway.
Yeah.
And with you saying that it wouldn't be across the board for everyone anyway. So I just wanted the public to hear about that as well. So yeah. Thank you.
So the next slide that you'll see is, not that one, is a question about whether or not we want to increase municipal taxes. Now, council has allocated, Leanna, remind me of what that number was that we were increasing spending by based upon the new initiatives as well as the community group savings.
The total right now is $104,700.
Okay. So $104,000 is what we're short on revenue from that perspective. That equates to a 0.5% tax increase if we're going to cover it by taxation, or council has kind of three options here. One, cover it by taxation, delegate it back to staff to find the funding, or reallocate funding internally from other projects into to make up that shortfall. So here is the question, and we probably should have. I'm going to skip ahead a slide because I think this is a couple slides. I think this is an important conversation as well. And if you go, I'll go take you to the last slide. As it relates to wages, COLA and steps. Currently COLA is sitting at 1.3%, which in this budget is not budgeted for, and is a cost of $108,000 and change. Steps, which is budgeted for, is currently, prior to COLA, is $126,225. I think this is an important, before we start talking about tax rates, is probably an important conversation to have before we start establishing that, and maybe this is one way to find that $104,000 as well. So I'll open that up for conversation with council and how it relates to the tax rates.
Hey, Chris, just a brief difference between COLA and steps.
Sure. COLA is the cost of living increase based upon year-over-year rolling average of cost of living from CPI for City of Calgary. And so that is established each July. And this July of 2020, is it 2020, I'm forgetting my years, 1.3%. STEPS is a performance-based system based upon the performance of individual employees. And it is based upon a performance evaluation process and a framework that we've been using internally here for several years. And that's based upon good performance for those employees. And that is $126,000.
Councillor Masterman.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. So Chris, did we do COLA and steps in 2020?
Yes, we did. We did COLA at 1% and steps was retained.
Right. Okay. The last time we didn't do COLA was, I believe, 2 years ago. Am I wrong on that?
Leanna, can you answer that question?
2 or 3.
I'm pretty sure it was 2 years ago, but it might have been 3. I'm like Chris, I'm not sure what year it is. I think it's 2020 right now, but I was signing documents the other day and I dated it to 2021. So
I guess my question to Chris as the boss, if we decide to not do either of those, what kind of response would you expect? Or is that an unfair question?
It's probably a difficult question to answer in this framework. I think the riskier one from a different perspective would be deleting COLA. That puts us behind when we start doing wage analysis, it puts us behind, and that's when you see big catch-ups. And so that's something to bear in mind, and that goes throughout the organization, not just ones that are in performance management under steps matrix, but that includes all our employees. So I think that would be the one that has the higher degree of risk. Steps, if it's applied appropriately, it may be $126,000 maximum. But if we don't have performance within the organization, it could be below that as well. But that is a bigger, that is typically 4% kind of wage increases to those individuals on the step matrix. Some of the detailed, I need to be careful here because some of the details associated with some of this could cause us complications in future discussions with entities within our organization. It's probably the most politically correct way to put it. And we are going into a process that we have to renegotiate some components of aspects of things too. So if we wanted to get into more detail, I would kind of recommend that we move into an in-camera session at that point in time and kind of put everything out on the table.
That's very helpful, Chris. I wasn't trying to back you into any kind of a corner or anything. I was
Nope.
just, I'm glad you could say what you could say. Thank you.
So I've got it at 2017, COLA was frozen. Carol.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you, Chris. I think this is a discussion that in the future, I'd appreciate an in-camera session for sure. Last year at budget time, I was completely against COLA, and because of the changes in the economy, and because I knew of no one in my research who was getting a cost of living thing, and administration as well as administration and SLT convinced me that it was good for 2020 and or 20 whatever year we are in, yes, and that it would be revisited at this budget. And so I've been doing my research again, and there's a lot of people that are just hanging on by a thread in their own households and not getting cost of living. I've done research asking people, do they even know what the STEP program is? And in the organizations that I've talked to, they don't even have something like that. And also I reached out to neighboring municipalities with the question about what is their average around percentage of operating budget and staff wages and salaries. And currently, like I mentioned at one of our other budget meetings, High River sits at 45%. The municipalities that did get back to me range anywhere from 21% to 30%. Also, when I was reaching out to people, an elected official from another municipality had a very interesting point that municipal government staff, like people who work in municipalities, they had to, when the oil industry was really strong, in order to attract strong, capable people, the municipalities had to look at increasing the wages quite significantly so that they could actually compete and get qualified staff. I think we have to revisit this now because the oil industry is not prospering. And I think that we offer solid, strong wages to begin with. And I know this firsthand as my experience as a career and employment person in town, that anyone who came looking for a job would say, I want to work for the town because they pay so well. So in light of COVID, I will be voting against COLA and STEPs because we represent the people. And there's a lot of people that don't have pensions, they don't have benefits, they're not getting cost of living. Like so I am, with the disclaimer, I feel confident that the municipal staff knows that I really value all of the work that they do and that the organization does, but I can't in good conscience actually vote for this during this time.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Carol, you took the words out of my mouth. I was about to say all the same things as you said, but with the addition of a couple of items, is that various municipal organizations are not going forward with COLA this year, including the county. Foothills County is not putting in a COLA for all their staff. There are alternatives to COLA. It's one year we did it where it was only for half a year, and it started on July the 1st. So it doesn't have to be for the entire year, but the one thing about COLA is it continues year after year after year once you made that increase. So yeah, other thing is that all of council gets COLA as well if it's approved. And so that can be a factor in our vote of things. And I personally feel that this whole discussion should be an in-camera discussion as a labor item. But I will be voting against COLA increase as well.
Okay, I'm confused on the two comments wanting to talk about this in camera. You've been very outright and very clear on where you're going to vote. So I don't really know what we want to do in an in-camera session. I don't think it's necessary. I can tell you right now and I'm not afraid to say to anybody what my friend is so I guess I'm questioning what would you want to discuss in camera that we're not doing right now?
Yeah, no, I didn't mean it in that respect. I meant that from the outset, it was a labor item that possibly should have been discussed in camera. Mm. But it's already out in the open. So.
Well, it's out in the open, and I don't know that, Don, I think everybody understands where we're at with this. Whether you're an employee or you're a member of the public, the environment is just what the environment is. And working for municipal government is a very, very secure level of employment, right? Very secure level of employment right now. That's, good wages and excellent benefits and everything else. You look at what else is happening, comparing it to the private sector. Boy, oh boy. I think they've all got friends that are probably not doing as well as they are. So I think as a municipal employee, be darn grateful for where you've landed. And I'll be voting against both of these. I just can't, we just cannot do that right now. The provincial government is slashing us every time we 7 ways to Sunday. Every time we turn around, there's something else they want back out of us, or not going to pay for this, or want us to pay more for that. All these kinds of things, right? And it's just where we're at. It's the perks are not there. The perks are not there anymore. Whether they will ever come back in our lifetime, who knows? But they're not there right now. Solid employment, assured employment. Boy, I think that's what anybody's looking for right now. Kathy.
Thanks, Chris. Just a quick question. If just comparing the two, not everyone necessarily even qualifies for steps in a given year. Is that correct? So if you did just steps, that is not impacting all of the staff.
It may not. It depends on their performance and how it's linked back to their performance and their agreements from that perspective. So it goes back to that original email I sent when Councillor Nychuk asked the question about how steps was applied. We are reformatting the system from that perspective, and trying to come up with a system that matches the accountability framework that council's adopted as well.
Well, and I think on the other hand, because we're fortunate to have staff that have worked with the town for years, some of them hit their cap. Is that not also correct?
I believe so. Not knowing all the staff within the organization and their levels of experience and their years of experience, but I believe some have, yes.
I would say we're about basically 50-50 of how many are at their top step currently.
Okay, I don't have any further questions on this, so you want me to take a quick poll on this one, Chris?
No, I think there's clarity there.
Okay, if anybody else has anything to say on the issue, please do so, but I think Chris has clarity.
So from a tax rate perspective, this $104,000, if I guess actually probably do need a vote at some point in time, Craig, about the step aspect of things. If you take steps away, then your $104,000 is a 0%.
Yeah,
zero your tax increase.
I don't know. So anybody else speak up, but my vote's no to both.
Because COLA is not in the budget right now. We did not include that, but steps we did include.
Yeah, I'm saying remove steps as well. Fairness across the board, regardless of performance right now, is we just don't have the money to be paying out. We just don't. That's my thought. Jamie?
Thanks, Mayor. I think I'm the only council member that hasn't spoken to this issue, and I have to concur with your position in that both COLA and steps should be waived for this coming budget season. I'm in the workforce. I've seen what's going on. I hear what's happening to people, and I think we've got some of the best staff on board, but it's just a financial thing this year. Thanks.
Good. Anybody else? If you are not in favor of that direction, then please stick your hand up. No hands are coming up, so you've got clear direction. No COLA, no steps, Chris.
We will maintain that 0% then.
Thank you.
Balance the budget from that perspective. The last item that we need to talk about is confirmation about the utility diversion proposal that we presented last week, and whether or not that's going forward to use the surplus and setting up that tax stabilization system that we described. I want to be clear. We can maintain this with no tax increase in 2021, and we can revisit this in 2022 to maintain that 0% tax increase for 2021.
Excellent. I love it.
And so if we can get a recommendation to proceed with the use of that surplus for ceasing the diversion, that would be appropriate at this time.
Okay, unless anybody is against it on council, if you're against it, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I will give Chris the recommendation to proceed with the reserve fund structure.
And council, that is all we have. Any more questions, concerns, or comments?
You guys are rock stars. Well done. Carol?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say that this was a really well-organized budget. I really appreciated the slides as well as the binder, and I just found it really clear and concise, and I appreciate that. And and thanks, Leanna, because you're always very clear as well when we have questions. But it seemed fairly painless.
Except for community group funding. That's always a struggle. No matter what community you're in, it's always a struggle.
I think that's good though, because it shows that we care about our community. If that one wasn't a problem, I would have questions about that. So I think it just shows about the strength of this council, as well as the town caring about the community groups.
We good?
I think if there's nothing else, we'll prepare the final budget for adoption for December 14th based upon those recommendations. And we will have an adopted budget before the end of the year.
Sounds great.
Perfect.
Well done, Chris, Leanna, Ray, all of the staff involved. Excellent job on this. Excellent job, council. Good questions, good conversation, great decisions. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned, 4:40 p.m.
Thank you all.
Have a good night.